Reborn. Evolving from Nothing Chapters 131 to 140. Chapter 131. Battle for the Entrance. Thud. Dorian's feet skidded slightly as he landed atop the jutting rock. The golden circle that glowed atop it was filled with magic energy, concentrated such that it gave Dorian goosebumps. Great Lord. Leader's voice echoed with respect as the powerful demonic human crouched down on the edge of the jutting rock, his ruler's bow at the ready. There are 10 of these, but only 6 people can go in each one. There are 4 of us, counting the 2 dragons. His mind raced ahead of him as he scanned the nearby surroundings. The Ascension Ruins entrance portals would start to activate as soon as a single being walked into range of them. As Dorian stood within it, he could see faint yellow particles starting to rise off of it, glowing brilliantly. According to the information Dorian had gained about the ruins from the leader of that all-female mercenary team, the portal would take approximately 60 seconds to fully charge. After that, all it needed was for 6 beings to step within its range. It would then automatically activate. There was a several minutes wide window after it was fully charged to get in the zone to be teleported into the ruins. According to the logs he'd obtained, if the number of people in range of the entrance was less than 6, it would still automatically activate after a few minutes of waiting. All we need to do is hold it till it's fully charged and then stand still on it. There's only 4 of us, so we'll either need to let others step up and join us, or defend it till it automatically activates. Dorian went over the plan he had thought up on the way, nodding his head. He squinted as he walked out of the direct portal area, looking out at the ground around him. He could make out swarms of figures moving about atop the shell chaotically. The lava that was exposed to the air had rapidly cooled, the outer surfaces hardening. This allowed everyone present the ability to move freely atop the back of the enormous beast, instead of having to jump from boulder to boulder like they did on the magma sea. Why did he build his ruins atop a freaking lava swimming turtle, anyway? That seems needlessly complex. Dorian shook his head, unable to fathom Euclid's thoughts. He bent down for a moment as the turtle shook, trying to keep his footing. THWUNK. Not even a full second after Dorian knelt down, a resounding impact sounded off as a dark brown arrow slammed into the jutting rock, cracking it slightly. Black energy crackled off it dangerously, fizzling ineffectively into nothingness. The arrow pierced directly through the area Dorian's head would have been if he had been standing in the same spot. Dorian's eyes widened as he saw this and spun around. His body reacted almost on its own as he stepped forward in a crouched position, what was left of Euclid's memories in his mind making him go on guard. Whoa, that came out of almost nowhere. He mentally thanked his fate-twisting soul, once more, for saving him. Fighting against him must be incredibly annoying. The same probably applied for all anomalies, with their obscene luck. Nice dodge, Great Lord. The attacker is from the south. Leader's voice burst forth as the fighter sprinted to the south side of the jutting stone, his ruler's bow at the ready. SWHISH. SWHISH. Leader launched off 2 energy arrows in a fraction of a second, at a pair of figures that wielded dull gray armor, standing about 100 meters off. Dorian barely managed a glance at them in that split second. Species: Human. Class: Lord. Class: Middle. Maximum energy level: 58,223. Species: Ethmen. Class: Lord. Class: Late. Maximum energy level: 74,223. Boom. Boom. Both the human and Ethmen were knocked away dozens of meters by the blast despite their sizable strength. The ground they were standing on only cracked slightly, however, the bright yellow explosion of energy unable to damage the environment. It seemed the rocky surface of this enormous turtle was extremely tough and durable. Whoosh! A resplendent rainbow aura burst out around Leader as he unveiled his kingly pride. His physical appearance transformed from that of a drab huntsman clad in camouflaged clothing to that of a royal, kingly being with incredible bearing. SHWISH. SWHISHSHWISH. Just after that, Leader unleashed a swarm of arrows as he intercepted a multitude of fireballs, balls of ice, and energy bolts that were hurled at him. Every arrow he fired was imbued with his law of pride, a law that he had mastered completely, stepping into the king class. Dorian's eyes widened as he looked at the sheer deluge of spells that had been cast their way. Green fireballs containing poisonous flames, black bolts of deadly lightning, bright balls of dangerous fire, hurtling boulders of jagged ice. By standing up on the jutting rock and taking over one of the portal entrances, they had made themselves targets for attacks. Attacks that leader took head-on, his incredible skill with a bow on display. Dorian watched in astonishment as the powerful warrior intercepted more than a dozen powerful spells, each one detonating in midair and raining down with chaotic energy on the world around them. I should help, he thought, instantly making a decision. He couldn't afford to just stand here. He also didn't want to kill anyone. But when he was openly being attacked, just sitting there and letting people try to murder him was unacceptable. He would defend himself. He needed to conserve energy. He willingly admitted that without Euclid's memories to help him, he was only average at best at physical combat. Ever since Euclid woke up inside him, the memories that had once merged completely with him seemed to have receded. Dorian only had scraps of them left over in his mind. He could still remember certain basic techniques and practice styles. But all the epic absolute law-infused moves, the virtual wealth of combat experience, all of that had been absorbed back into Euclid when he awoke. I still know how to use the mystic martial arts I already practiced, like the boulder breaker punch or the flush gale moment technique, as well as those Hirajira martial techniques. He hadn't forgotten anything he'd physically used, the memories of those techniques and exactly how to do them firmly imprinted on his mind. Still, let's go long range for now. His perfect body ability drew far too much energy to use, and without it, Dorian was unsure how he would face up against so many foes. Hyperion beam, charge. Instantly, a black ball of energy began to condense in his hand. The air around this ball distorted slightly as it drew on the latent energy, becoming stronger and stronger. At the same time, Dorian activated a second ability. Black Flames, go. He combined his Black Flames ability, the powerful dragonfire that his black-scaled rage dragon form held, with the Hyperion beam, giving it an even more potent impact. Rapidly, the ball of energy in his hand began to charge. Boom, boom, boom. A deluge of explosions rang out as leader intercepted several more spells, his skill and accuracy unerring. Not a single one of the attacks had made it past the energy shots from his powerful bow. Despite all the attacks that were sent their way, however, far more spells and attacks were spread out around the shell as neighboring groups attacked each other, trying to force them to flee. Nearly 300 wizards or warriors of various varieties were concentrated near their entrance, a relatively smaller number. The place they had arrived at was one of the farthest sections due to their speed, and therefore had the fewest nearby challengers. Everyone was aware that the fewer men or women left on the shell, the greater a chance anyone would have at securing an entrance. That, and a large number of participants were here simply to prey on others, looting their spatial rings and treasures. There were many a wealthy wizard here intent on trying to break into king class or complete their understanding of a law. Magmoor, unless one was tucked away in one of the oasis cities, was essentially a lawless land controlled by no major power. The Blazing King had little interest in stopping crime beyond his city, and none of the other oasis cities dared to do anything different. Even now, Dorian saw at least a couple of groups turn tail and flee, carrying injured teammates as they fled the battle. However, their luck seemed to have run its course. As leader shot down a few more spells, a loud voice suddenly rang out, catching the attention of the nearby fighters. Everyone, the entrance has been activated by that king-class archer. If we don't work together to take him out, none of us will stand a chance at securing it when we tire or are wounded. The speaker was a sly-looking Earthman dressed in a full set of red robes. He could be seen standing with two other robed wizards. All of them had a powerful, red aura covered in flames surrounding them, giving their group a united, powerful appearance. He's got a point, one white-robed wizard said, a middle-aged woman wielding a large black staff. How many of us are king class? A black-plate armored warrior exclaimed, waving his sword around at those nearby. Taking down the king classes now and fighting for it later is a solid idea. Another warrior agreed. Archer, identify yourself. A slightly overweight wizard wearing a pair of large spectacles said, motioning at leader angrily. The combat all around them drew to a temporary pause as the voice finished its echoing reverberations. Loud conversations replaced it as the various wizards and warriors discussed aloud the merits of the suggestion. Many of them demanded leader identify himself, wanting to be sure of who he was before they attacked. Few were willing to enrage a major power or any sizable force. Unfortunately, Leader and Dorian were decidedly neither. Crap. As Dorian looked out at the sea of faces, he realized that very few of them were what he would consider very strong. Almost all of them were Lord class, which meant very strong when compared to most beings. However, Dorian's black-scaled rage dragon form was already capable of taking on more than a dozen Lord-class wizards on his own. En masse, however, that would be a very different story. Not even a king-class expert like Leader could block 100 different Lord-class spells or attacks. Dorian's Hyperion beamball was still charging, having gained a decently large amount of energy. You dare ask for my name? Ha ha ha, what foolishness is that? Consider me nameless and come at me if you dare. Leader's voice was full of arrogance as he responded to the crowd, his rainbow aura of pride bursting forward tremendously. A huge amount of pressure washed off his body and slammed into the crowd, causing many of the onlookers to step back. The crowd seemed to mill about in confusion, the pauses in combat continuing as no one made the first move. At the back of the crowd, a black-skinned human wearing a set of loose, open vest and pants, both originally white but stained slightly gray from the ash falls on Magmor and time, nodded his head in approval. His shoulder-length dreadlocks moved slightly as he nodded. Nameless, this monk does agree, an apt title for any man. His words were quiet and unnoticed by most, containing no special aura or power. His presence almost seemed to be invisible, in fact, as he watched the battle and current stand still with passive interest. HMPH, useless archer, you can't even secure the entrance against a bunch of measly ants. A majestic, powerful voice rang out, smashing down on the scene as a huge, golden aura spread out. One full of majestic nobility and arrogant strength. This second aura smacked into the crowd and sent even more wizards or warriors reeling back. Many of them began to back away, unwilling to engage in two powerful king-class experts. Aiden, golden eyes flashing, waltzed forward as he landed on the jutting rock. Mira landed right behind him, her eyes demure as she looked around. The two dragons had been lying low in the crowd, not engaging in combat. They seemed intent on hiding their presence as much as possible until it was no longer possible. Dorian's heart filled with relief as he saw them. It seemed like they would manage to take this entrance without much danger. Everyone, are you sure you want to give up on your chances like this? The dreams of a lifetime, of reaching the heavens themselves, lie within these ruins. Dorian's eyes hardened in anger as the same red-robed Ethmen from before yelled out loud, agitating the crowd. There's only 2 of them and more than 100 of us. We 3 are members of the Blazing King's team. As long as you help us take them out, we guarantee that none of the Blazing King's other men will participate in the fight for this entrance. The crowd reacted to the Ethman's yells, especially when they heard he was a member of the Blazing King's entourage. That wizard's name had a huge amount of influence on Magmor, especially this close to Tomo City. Damn it, we were so close. I will not allow myself to fail and let William die because of you. Dorian swore. Black Flame's Hyperion beam. Go. He unleashed his attack without holding back. He would not show mercy to those trying to kill him. The black orb of energy and fire that Dorian had been charging for several seconds had already reached a sizable amount of power. It could have been charged longer, if Dorian had had the time, increasing its power, but he needed to make a move now. Whoosh! A black bar of flaming light seared across the air, moving at a very fast speed. By combining his black flames with the bar of light, Dorian had slowed the Hyperion beam attack down slightly, but greatly increased its melting power. It crossed the 100 or so meters between Dorian and the Blazing King trio in a split second. Boom! A small explosion shook the air as black fire and energy shot outward, throwing up a cloud of ash and cracked stone from the magma that had solidified. The crackles of energy swept the air from the remnants of the attack, a dangerously intimidating noise. The entire crowd jumped away a good dozen meters at this, several of them outright fleeing from the scene of battle, wanting nothing to do with the confrontations happening at this entrance. Dorian's concentrated Hyperion beam attack, combined with his black flames, was something that could easily annihilate a regular Lord-class wizard, enough to fully punch through an innate barrier. As the dust settled, however, Dorian's eyes widened in shock. Instead of the expected result, taking out or at least injuring the wizard that was trying to incite the crowd to murder them, his attack had been completely blocked by a single, robe-enshrouded figure. Through the shadow of the robe, Dorian could just barely see a hint of a smile. "Consider that your reward for drawing our attention here and helping me find two of my targets early," that smiling figure said, a man whose appearance was mostly covered by that long, black robe. The man pulled the robe down, revealing a face that was half covered in what appeared to be crystals. Crystals that gleamed with pure, blue light, sparkling in the morning air. Not just crystal, but raw, glistening diamond. The vice head of the diamond department that they had clashed with earlier. The wizard Taman. "Huh, you again, you arrogant fool. Did you not lose enough face the last time you appeared before us?" Aiden's voice boomed as he glared at the diamond wizard, crossing his arms. Did you happen to turn half your brain to diamond too, Rockface? I only see one of you." Leader immediately bit back, refusing to back down as well. The crowd watched the unfolding drama, all of them standing still as if they were still unsure what to do, caught up in the exchange. "Hick, I believe he is referring to me, young archer." A boisterous, rowdy voice cut into the air, one accompanied by a monstrously powerful aura and a strong scent of fruit alcohol. "Why hello, my draconic friends. It seems we've met again." Dorian stared at head of the diamond department. He'd avoided scanning the man last time because, according to Asra, his demonic eyes ability that allowed him to closely detect an opponent's strength could be detected by those close to the angelic level. The moment had been so tense that Dorian had opted against it, not wanting to force an unnecessary battle. Now, however, it seemed it no longer mattered. His eyes flashed as he looked at the powerful, hostile wizard, one of the 12 walls of the Boral autarchy. Species: human. Class: king class, pseudo-angelic. Maximum energy level: 5,221,223. Oh dear, this is not good. Chapter 132 Realization. The draconic tribes and the Boral autarchy had long since been at each other's necks. War had broken out between the two major powers multiple times, and even when they weren't at war, skirmishes were commonplace. As of right now, the tribes and the autarchy were technically not at war. The Black Gold tribe, the strongest tribe at the moment, though not the leader of the other tribes by any means, was in negotiations with the autarchy for a ceasefire, alongside a few representatives from other tribes. That didn't mean that the tribes could move freely through the Boral autarchy or act unrestrained, however. Aiden glared at the head of the diamond department. His eyes flashed with golden light as he jumped up into the air. Whoosh! Aiden's body morphed, instantly abandoning his humanoid form and transforming into a huge, hulking golden flame dragon that radiated pure, raw energy. Species: Golden Flame Dragon. Class: King Class, Middle. Maximum energy level: 1,047,412. In terms of energy levels, Aiden was quite a bit weaker than the head of the diamond department. However, in terms of actual power, the difference between the two was not as large as it seemed. While the maximum energy level of a creature took into account some portion of their physical strength, it could not perfectly account for when one combined physical strength and one's natural body with the energy from one's soul spell matrix and the power of law. This was largely due to the huge variety of forms and physiques in the 30,000 worlds. Achieving such a balance that applied equally to all forms was impossible. If a dragon and a human stood side by side, each with an energy level of roughly 500,000 points, the two beings would not be perfectly equal. The dragon, by far, would overpower the human, due to its powerful physique and sheer size. In terms of raw might, it would be far stronger than a human with a similar energy level. The Flame Empyrean Turtle was a gargantuan beast, and had an equally gargantuan energy level approaching 22 million points, with a soul spell matrix at the pseudo-angelic level. In terms of real power, however, it was far stronger than a human would be with an equivalent energy level. The Flame Empyrean Turtle could face off against true angelic class beings and come away completely unscathed. Energy levels were a good metric for strength in general, but once one focused on higher levels or more powerful creatures, the class of one's soul spell matrix and the breed of one's bloodline played a far bigger role. Humans were the most adaptive species in the 30,000 worlds. They had the ability to increase their strength at an incredible rate, improving their energy levels to the extreme. Other species, like those of the draconic tribes, improved at a slower rate. The stronger a creature's physical form, the harder it was to increase their overall strength. Aiden, as a middle king-class Golden Flame Dragon, was one of the strongest members of the Golden Flame tribe. Boom! Aiden's body landed down on the ground, the golden, majestic aura that surrounded him crashing down and spreading with ferocious force. It was overwhelmingly strong, the aura of a truly draconic being. Oh my god, a dragon! Fall back, quick, go to the other entrances. Most of the crowd, upon seeing Aiden, immediately gave up and fled. Some cast spells to shield themselves as they fled, while others abandoned everything and burst into a sprint. Some even brought out and activated defensive magic artifacts. The multitude of powerful wizards and warriors didn't flee out of cowardice. Simply, the reputation that the draconic tribes held was not something any sane being would want to face off against. Finally showing your true colors, I'm afraid I'm going to have to take you two in for questioning, Drakes. We don't have any records of tribe members like you crossing our lands legally. Hick. Jiro stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Grr. Aiden merely responded with a low, guttural growl, one that sent shivers through Dorian's spine, his adept wrath vampire ears picking up every decibel of it. It was a growl of a predator. A predator that was looking at prey. How would you even know if there were records? Who says we had to cross your lands? We have no quarrel with you. Let us part on neutral terms. Myra's voice sounded off as the voice of reason as she argued back. Jiro shrugged. I'm afraid I'll need to confirm everything first. His Highness has made it very clear on that when it comes to your kind. Of course. Jiro smiled, the alcohol gourd on his back sloshing about. You are welcome to resist. Killing intent flowed off the department head in an almost lazy fashion, as if the head didn't see them as a true challenge. This killing intent seemed to lessen, however, as the department head glanced aside, looking at Dorian for a moment before returning his attention to Aiden. I'm afraid not, you alcoholic turkey. Leader's voice boomed out with confidence as he jumped forward, holding his bow at the ready as he landed on the ground next to Aiden's large, draconic form. This godly human, Leader began, banging on his chest, shall be the one to stop you. His voice boomed out with pride, the air around him distorting as the rainbow aura flashed. Energy condensed around him as he prepared to enter his powerful, super state. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he heard Leader's words. They sounded rather familiar, siding with Drakes over humanity. Why does this not surprise me? I will be the one to arrest you, slave of the dragon race. Taman stepped forward, holding his diamond arm forward as he pointed at Leader. Department head, I will admit your strength is great. But do you think you can take us both on at once? Myra's voice took on a grand, but peaceful air, as she transformed as well, jumping off the platform and leaving Dorian alone. A graceful jade-scaled dragon appeared, one whose scales glittered beautifully in the mid-morning light of Magmoor. Her wise jade dragon's full form. At the same time, a jade-colored aura spread out, rippling in the air. The pressure from these beings facing off was incredible. Dorian felt lightheaded just looking at it, despite being so far back. In that tense moment, the department head Jiro did something a bit odd. He turned away from facing off against Aiden to glance at Dorian again. A hint of uncertainty appeared in his eyes. Upon seeing that Dorian was merely watching with narrowed eyes, the look of uncertainty vanished. Shoot, Dorian mentally swore as he saw this. The department head seemed to take his inaction as a sign that he wasn't interested in interfering. It's not that I'm not interested. It's just that I can't quite match up with y'all yet, he thought begrudgingly. Why was he still so weak, damn it? If he used his perfect body ability, Dorian was fully confident he would be able to trade blows with them. Ukeli had used it to great effect when he fought against a full-strength leader. He might not be as skilled as Ukeli, but his physical enhancement would be the same. The only problem was that he could only maintain that state for a brief period. What should I do? His thoughts were thrown into disarray. Jiro did not hesitate. Your combined prowess might be slightly annoying. Even I cannot simply ignore Dragonfire. However, who said I would face you alone? He snapped his fingers. Immediately, seemingly spawning out of some type of spatial artifact, a dozen large armored figures appeared. All of them were covered in crystalline diamond armor, glinting brightly in the morning light. As they appeared, each one released a powerful Lord-class aura. Asra, what are those? Dorian queried mentally at the sight. They appear to be some type of golem artifacts, similar to the Diamond Soldier golem, enhanced and created for battle. Their strength puts them in the Lord class, mid to late. Asra gave an estimate of their strength and a mild description of what they were. Oh, you can recognize these artifacts, but not others? Dorian, in that split second, mentally sent her an offhand question. My logs have information about anything that resembles a living being, including various golem creatures. Her response was succinct. Hick. The drunk department head gave them all a raucous smile. Let's have a go at it, ha ha ha. He waved his hand, causing a large, gleaming diamond axe to appear in it. Immediately, the dozen diamond soldiers rushed forward towards Mira, their legs smashing down on the ground in unison as they attacked. Pure, white auras rose about them, combining perfectly. At the same time, Jiro leapt towards Aiden, a pure, unadulterated aura rippling out around him. One that was earthy and strong, rich and deadly. One that seemed to give off a faint tang of alcohol. Aiden rushed forward at Jiro, swiping down with one of his long, draconian claws. The gold aura that swarmed around him from his law of majesty rippled in the air, smashing towards the diamond wizard. Boom! An earth-shattering roar broke out as a shockwave slammed into Dorian, threatening to throw him off his feet. He barely held onto the pillar he was standing on, sliding back into range of the circular portal that was charging up in the middle. The impact from the two beings' charge seemed to have mostly equalized. Jiro was knocked back a single step while Aiden was knocked back one as well, though his steps were decidedly larger. Neither combatant seemed injured. WHOSSHHHH. The crackling sound of dragonfire rang out as Aiden unleashed a flurry of brilliant golden flames, burning with a light that seemed almighty and powerful. Dorian could feel the heat from all the way over here. Instead of dodging it, Jiro seemed to welcome the flames, laughing out loud as he pulled out the gourd on his back, setting his axe down beside him. Splash! Jiro threw out a huge wave of the fruit alcohol that was in that gourd, splashing it in a huge arc. At the same time, he lightly tossed the gourd into the air, freeing his hands as he clasped them together to cast a spell. Diamond magic. Diamond transformation. Immediately, the splashing arc of fruit alcohol transformed, turning into a magically enhanced bubble of pure diamond. WHOSH. FSSSHHHHH. The golden flames that Aiden sent slammed into the bubble of diamond and washed around it, flooding up against it. The flames were deadly and held an incredibly corrosive power, but even they were unable to melt through the diamond seal. Wow, their diamond magic is really no joke. The durability is incredible. It made sense to Dorian, now, why the vice head would transform a full half of his body into the magic diamond that it had become. The strength and power it gave, as well as pure defensive prowess, must have seemed a worthwhile trade-off. In the meantime, the diamond soldiers had all swarmed Mira. Mira lithely dodged attack after attack, shooting out a few swaths of dragonfire of her own as she jumped around. Her strategy appeared to be based on taking advantage of her relatively smaller size as a wise jade dragon to move in and out fast. The jade flames she sent out slammed against the diamond soldiers and seemed to have little effect. It made some of them stop and stutter, but the golems got back up and moving shortly after. Vice Head Taman, meanwhile, had engaged Leader in a duel of their own. Ooh, you almost got me there, you sorry excuse for a rocky canyon. Leader appeared to be enjoying himself, hurling insult after insult like he hurled arrow after arrow, constantly pelting Taman with energy shots. The half-diamond human took all the shots stoically, blocking blast after blast using his diamond arm. They seemed to be causing him little to no damage, each one dispersed without too big a fuss. The diamond magic that these wizards use is really, really strong, defensively. Dorian's eyes widened at this as he saw the full power of the diamond department. There was a good reason why it was considered part of the Big 12, the strongest departments in the Boral autarky. Huge explosions, shockwaves, and clashing auras mixed together as the combatants engaged. It seemed like all the other participants had turned tail and fled, running away from the scene as the huge battle broke out. Even the trio from the Blazing King had turned tail, unwilling to risk themselves over this entrance. Is there no type of attack I can use to help? He thought, frustration almost overwhelming him. He could go out and try to fight, using what was left of Euclid's skills. He could cobble together a few of the abilities he'd managed to pick up thanks to the new forms he'd gained and perhaps have some small effect. Dorian looked down at his hands, a feeling of uselessness running rampant in his mind. What would Will do? He thought about the man he was trying to save, the wood wizard turned light wizard that had sacrificed himself for him. Will, that's it, that's right. His eyes abruptly lit up as a thought struck him. I am an anomaly. While my original powers were given to me by Ukeli, there is one that I have that even Ukeli never had. The ability to twist fate using my will. Thanks, Will. He mentally thanked his unconscious companion for helping remind him. Who says I'm useless here, Dorian thought, looking up. His eyes flashed once more as he scanned his surroundings, taking in the massive battle that was taking place. A small smile appeared on his face. With this power in my hands, even gods themselves will tremble before me. Dorian pulled hard on his will as he looked out at the fighters. And commanded fate to change. Chapter 133. To ash the world around Dorian seemed to distort, ever so slightly. A split second later, Dorian felt a huge drain on his soul as a flood of energy left it. Dorian, soul status, soul stage. Lord class, middle, health. Perfect, energy. 53,112 57,540 seconds. In a single second, he used up a bit more than 4,000 points of energy from his soul. Whoosh! The battle in front of Dorian was ongoing. Department head Jiro snapped his fingers and cancelled his diamond magic spell, causing the transformed fruit alcohol to return back to its liquid state, flowing back into the gourd that he replaced on his back. At the same time, he held his hand out to the side, causing his axe to float up into his palm. Hick, diamond magic. Enlarge. Jiro took a step forward as Aiden took a moment to recover from unleashing such a huge wave of golden flames. As he moved, the axe he held in his hand expanded, growing to an absurd size. In almost an instant, the axe head stretched to be roughly 10 meters across, a gargantuan axe that dwarfed the human by far. It seemed to be perfectly suited to Jiro as he swung it, however, leading the attack with a powerful burst of energy from the blue and green aura that surrounded him. The speed at which Jiro cut down was blurringly fast, far too quick for Aiden to dodge. Aiden's draconic body shivered slightly as he ducked backwards as much as possible, a curtain of golden light covering him protectively as he braced to try and deflect the blow. Before the brutal axe slash could land, however, something odd happened. The ground beneath Jiro's feet seemed to shift slightly. Thud! With a momentous amount of force, Jiro face planted directly into the rocky exterior of the massive turtle. His enlarged axe slammed down a second later, setting off a small shockwave of energy that lightly damaged the stone shell, to little avail. It was much more expensive to make him trip, and I didn't manage to set it up for Aiden to counterattack. Dorian's eyes narrowed only slightly as he ran his mind over the results. Aiden blinked, his jaw dropping slightly as he saw all of this. Yes, you see? That is how that feels, head Jiro. Taemin's voice echoed out loud with satisfaction as he took a moment from chasing after Leader to comment. Leader, meanwhile, took one look at the powerful, majestic head of the diamond department, one who was currently staring into the ground with a face full of rock, and burst out laughing. Ahahaha, oh my, your diamond department really has some unique special techniques. Not only do you transform yourselves into rocks, you can't keep yourself away from them either. Leader had to dodge backwards almost immediately after as Taemin took offense, summoning a large diamond sword and rushing at him. Jiro, meanwhile, got to his feet with a look of consternation. His axe returned to a normal size as he turned and glared at Aiden in mild irritation and curiosity. Aiden snorted back, "Don't blame me for your department's poor footwork." Much of the tension in the moment seemed to have fled. Let's try over there again. Dorian's eyes slipped to the side, where the vice-head Taemin was chasing Leader. Whoosh! Roughly 1,000 points of energy fled from Dorian's soul spell matrix. At the same time, Taemin was leaping forward, a long blade bearing in on Leader. Just as his right foot landed on the ground, just a few meters from Leader, the rock he was standing on seemed to distort by an extremely small amount. Just enough, however, to make him lose his footing. Whoosh! As his body hurled forward, off balance, Taemin threw himself to the side, twisting in midair as he caught the fall. He almost seemed to be expecting the random trip, prepared for it. His quick reactions saved him from faceplanting, though he couldn't avoid falling down. SHWISH. SHWISH. Unfortunately for Taman, Leader took full advantage of that momentary slip. In less than a second, two separate arrows blasted out, full of potent energy. While Leader expressed a rather cavalier attitude, his attention to combat was both precise and unforgiving. Giving him even a single opening could lead to fatal results. Boom! Two explosions rang out as the energy bolts detonated right on top of Taman. At the last moment, however, Taman's diamond right arm snaked upward, blocking the impact of both attacks. The colorful energy from Leader's aura clashed with Taman's blue aura, both forces canceling out. Dorian frowned slightly when he saw this. Once more, the defensive prowess of diamond magic was showing up his plans. It's cheaper to affect Taman's fate than it is to affect Jiro's fate. Probably because of the differences in their soul spell matrix and souls. Jiro is much stronger at the pseudo-angelic level. Dorian confirmed his results. I should probably twist fate to do something other than tripping. Taman seems to have caught on to that. Taman was sent flying despite the successful block, his body tumbling as he was knocked even further off balance, soaring through the air. He landed down hard on his back roughly a dozen meters away. Ahahaha. You Boralians are really something, huh? Like father, like son, Leader mocked Taman after he saw him trip and barely managed to block his arrow attack. Vicehead Taman flipped up off the ground, his eyes bloodshot as he glared at Leader. Dust and rocky debris slid off him but coated his robe. How dare you disrespect the autarky? Also, that man is not my father. Taman glared daggers at Leader. The blue aura around him seemed to increase slightly in intensity as mad fervor bled through into his voice. Ouch. Even denying parental bonds despite the overwhelming similarities. Leader shook his head sadly and then turned to look at Jiro. My condolences, Head Jiro. The young ones have no respect these days. Alas. Jiro took a swig from his gourd of fruit alcohol, his voice equally sad. Filial piety is lost to the youth of today. He sighed deeply in agreement. I am not your son. Stop fraternizing with the enemy. Taman seemed as if he was about to explode, the entire ridiculous situation nearly causing him to fly into a rage. Mira, meanwhile, was constantly dodging the diamond soldier golems that were attacking her. Her movements maintained the graceful litheness and calm that wise jade dragons were known for. She wasn't able to take them out, but they didn't seem to be able to injure her either. The golems couldn't run indefinitely, so the battle between them was a war of attrition over anything. And, given that Mira was a king-class dragon, it was more likely than not that she would win, given enough time. Time it didn't seem she would get, as it turned out. Not because of the golems, but because of what the vice head did next. In the throes of his confused anger, Taman's eyes grew cold. He became fully serious, and at that moment, decided to go all out. Diamond magic. Ice Elf's gauntlet. Taman clasped his hands together and cast a spell, causing a shining gauntlet made out of, unsurprisingly, diamond to appear on his left hand. The gauntlet was covered in strange carvings and emanated an ancient power. Immediately after, he cast a second spell, so quickly it was almost impossible to distinguish between the two. Diamond magic. Ice Elf's spear. He clenched the air with his left, gauntlet-bearing, hand, as if he was holding a large spear. The blue aura around him exploded into a crescendo, power vibrating off him. Leader was already fully in his pride super state, his entire body operating at maximum strength. He held his ruler's bow at the ready, eyeing Taman as he prepared himself to unleash a hypervelocity shot if he needed to. He was caught, however, as he weighed the risks. Unleashing his ultimate move would leave him weakened and vulnerable. In the moment that Leader hesitated, Taman struck. Not in an orthodox way, like rushing forward or firing a spell off towards Leader. Instead, he pulled down violently with his left hand, still clenching at the air. WHOSH. WHOSH. Suffer the wrath of the Boral autarky. In the sky above them, materializing in that split second, was an enormous 100-meter-long diamond spear, covered in what appeared to be lightning bolts of blue energy. This spear was crackling down at a blazingly fast speed, headed directly towards Leader. No, fate, help him out. Dorian's eyes widened slightly as he barely managed to control his emotions, instantly twisting fate to try and help Leader. Thousands of points of energy fled from Dorian's soul, sloughing off him. More than 5,000 points. The spear had moved in with such speed and ferocity that, even in Leader's super state, it would be difficult to dodge. Boom! The giant spear slammed into the outer shell of the flame Empyrean turtle, piercing several meters into it. A large collection of shrapnel and stone shards were flung out into the air, lightning and energy exploding off the strike in deadly arcs. A burnt smell spread into the air as the energy melted the air itself, incredibly corrosive and strong. Through this all, Leader had dodged to the side as much as he could. He managed to avoid a direct impact from the spear, but was standing mere meters from the huge blow. Whoosh! Tendrils of lightning and energy snaked through the air directly at Leader, as did the shrapnel that had been thrown up from the ground. Just as they were about to land, however, the lightning, moving in seemingly random patterns, blasted right into the shrapnel that was headed for Leader, ready to pierce through him. Boom! A second, smaller explosion rang out as the lightning energy and shrapnel collided in midair, every single piece that was about to hit Leader simultaneously combusting. The resulting miniature explosions redirected the bolts of energy, causing them to coincidentally all miss Leader. The impact was so great it sent out a powerful shockwave, shivering in the air. Leader couldn't dodge this, but instead went with it, sailing off dozens of meters to the left. Despite the impact, he remained relatively uninjured, the more dangerous parts of the attack having missed him completely. The shockwave made neither Aiden nor Jiro flinch, passing over them to almost no effect. As it slammed into Mira and the diamond soldiers, however, it caused several of the golems to be flung into the air. Two of which landed on the platform with the portal entrance Dorian was forcibly clinging to as he weathered the shockwave. Two hulking golems that radiated a strong white aura. Damn! Taman swore as he saw Leader unexpectedly escape unscathed from his surprise attack. He was breathing heavily, the spell taking a lot out of him. In that moment, the diamond soldiers immediately turned towards Dorian, registering him as a hostile enemy. Their auras were, at a minimum, far stronger than anything Dorian could muster, just using his understanding of the law of wrath. As they rushed at him, the reactions of the others were mixed. Leader snorted arrogantly as he saw this while recovering, a smile on his face as if he was about to watch a good show. Taman was dealing with the aftershock of his powerful spell, on guard as he watched the reverberations of his attack fade. Aiden had split off from staring down Jiro to join back up with Mira. Head Jiro was perhaps the one watching Dorian's reactions the most, his eyes containing an awareness and intelligence that belied his drunken demeanor. Internally, Dorian smiled. Sending golems to kill me? He mentally shook his head. These diamond soldiers may be golems, but they are also something else. A small smile appeared on his face as he raised two hands, stretching them out towards each charging golem. Artifacts. The two golems were just centimeters away from Dorian at this point, bearing down on him with incredible force. Absorb. As soon as Dorian's fingers touched the golems, before they could land their attacks, he sent out a mental command, absorbing their energy like he could for almost all artifacts. Whoosh! The two diamond soldier golems, powerful treasured artifacts infused and created by a master craftsman familiar with diamond magic, possessing the same godly durability that this type of magic diamond held, shuddered as they ran into Dorian. And then collapsed into two piles of ash, instantly destroyed with a light touch. Chapter 134. Reveal. Everyone in sight froze, staring at the sheer, seemingly impossible result. Ash drifted down and into the air as the particle remnants of the two magic artifact golems collapsed, dissipating into nothingness. What? Jiro Cork of the Axe, the great diamond wall of the Boral autarky, one of the most elite wizards in the entire nation, stared at Dorian in pure, unadulterated shock. Of all the results he thought were possible, this was not one of them, not even if he considered Dorian an equal. After all, even Jiro himself couldn't do what Dorian had just done. Taman's eyes flew all the way up in sheer shock. He well understood how incredibly durable the golems were, more than anyone else here. He had practiced against them before, testing the diamond half of his body. He was well aware of their incredible toughness and the difficulty required to scratch them, let alone turn them to ash. The golems were made of a special type of diamond known as ether diamond, one of the hardest known substances in the 30,000 worlds, originally discovered by the Ethmen race. Most of the diamond magic that Taman studied focused on the manipulation of ether diamond. He had even integrated half his body into a magic network of ether diamond. And now, a random vampire with a weak, barely existent aura had just turned 2 diamond golems, constructed from ether diamond, into ash with a light touch. For the first time in a long while, Taman felt a seed of fear plant itself in his heart. Leader, meanwhile, was standing tall with his arms crossed, a huge, satisfied smirk on his face, pride rolling off him in literally visible waves. He looked on this result as if it was completely expected, as if there could have been no other possibility. His eyes were full of absolute confidence, without even the slightest hint of doubt. Aiden turned and gave Jiro a slightly consoling look, as if he understood Jiro's pain. Mira merely looked on and gave Dorian a small, grateful nod. Too weak. Dorian shook his head sadly, confidence flowing in his voice. You bore me, department head. I might just leave now if this is the best you have. Dorian put on his best disinterested voice as he took a step forward, standing firmly at the center of the jutting rock, within the boundaries of the entrance portal. The more confident he sounded, the better a chance of avoiding combat, he figured, especially given the look of shock on the department head's face. At that exact moment, as Dorian was grandstanding, the portal beneath him flashed. 60 seconds had passed in what felt like an eternity due to the fast-paced combat. The entrance portal had fully charged and would now automatically activate as soon as 6 people stood within it. Whoosh! Just as Dorian was registering this, a bright wave of light shot off from the portal. It seemed to hover around him for a brief moment and then vanish. The entrance to the Ascension ruins that Dorian was standing on then activated, abnormally, without waiting for the required 6 people. In a split instant, a pillar of warm light shot up as Dorian teleported, vanishing with the portal from the outer shell of the turtle, leaving behind a group of stunned onlookers. Hick, did he just leave? After all of that, Head Jiro's voice boomed incredulously. He just left? He held his hands out at a complete loss. In the back of his eyes, however, a light tinge of relief could just barely be seen, an emotion he immediately crushed upon realizing its existence. Boom! A resplendent explosion shook the air as Aiden and Mira withdrew in a retreat, their draconic bodies retreating as they backed away towards a different entrance. Leader could be seen, standing atop Myra's draconic body as he joined them in leaving the field of battle. Taman and Jiro just watched on, too shocked by Dorian's performance to do anything else. As the trio fled into the distance, if one looked closely, they would just barely be able to see Leader energetically flipping off Taman. More than 100 meters away, the figure of a black-skinned human could faintly be seen, wavering in and out of reality. This figure had been watching the entire battle without comment, nodded in appreciation as everything came to an end. This nameless monk does appreciate your performance, young warrior. If fate wills it, I shall try to aid you once. You remind me of the great founder himself. Kaladin would be proud. The monk's body shivered and vanished as he turned around, heading for a separate entrance as well. Bright lights flashed in Dorian's eyes, blinding him, as space seemed to fold in on itself, warping him away from his previous location to an entirely new place. He felt an odd stretching sensation, as if his entire body was being pulled apart and then put back together. Energy seemed to flow around him at such a rate that he couldn't sense anything at all. All of a sudden, everything returned to normal. Whoosh! Dorian fell to the ground as he gasped for breath, his heart pounding. He blinked and cleared his eyes as he looked around, instantly putting up his guard. He was standing in a large, sparsely decorated room. The floor was made of smooth gray stone, so smooth it looked like it had been carved directly flat. Several bookshelves seemed to have been carved into the gray stone walls and were filled with sheaths of paper and books. There was a single entrance to the room, a dozen or so meters away from Dorian, a stone door that was covered in a few random carvings. In the center of the room were several large desks, covered with neat stacks of paper. Cough. Dorian's mouth sputtered as he took a deep breath and immediately inhaled a huge amount of dust. He spent the next several seconds catching his breath and gathering his bearings once more. This room, the dust in it combined with its appearance, it felt incredibly old. As if it had laid like this, untouched, for hundreds of years. He took a few deep breaths as he calmed down, this time making sure to not breathe in any dust. Wise Jade Dragon. Growth stage, 3/5, young Jade Dragon. Growth progress 356,112 421,881. Nice. Dorian fist pumped the air as he looked at the energy values for his Wise Jade Dragon form. He'd applied them immediately once he absorbed the energy from the artifact golems, eager to complete his first natural dragon form. I must have gained at least 400,000 points in total. Those golems are worth a ton. I should try to snag a few more if I can manage it. He smiled as he looked on, pleased. He paused immediately after, however, as he heard his words echo in the room oddly. Biz. Dorian stepped backwards as an echoing buzz sounded off in the chamber. He looked from left to right, trying to find the source of the noises. Whoosh. The buzzing sound stopped, but the air around Dorian trembled with energy, replacing the noises. A second later, a voice began to speak. A voice that Dorian just barely recognized. Welcome, future self. It was the voice of Ukeli that Dorian had heard speak in his head. But a younger, less tired version, one that didn't have the same aged feeling. It was, instead, full of energy and excitement. His eyes were opened wide as he listened to the voice speak, looking around as he tried to find the source to it. It seemed to be coming from the air itself. If you are hearing this, it means at least one of my plans was successful after I ascended. I have successfully returned to the 30,000 worlds in a body that is no longer chained down by my race. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he heard this. Not quite, Ukeli. I know you are still somewhere, lurking within my soul. But you aren't back yet, at least not from me. He clenched his fists tightly as he heard this, a frown on his face. I created this time echo to inform you upon your arrival, on the chance that our memories are incomplete. Ukeli continued to speak. The Ascension Ruins, as Asra and I chose to call this grand creation, were my first attempt at making something that has a huge, purposeful impact on fate. My first experiment on trying to change fate without the ineffectual crutch that is fate magic, an extremely difficult task. We gathered knowledge and information from all over the 30,000 worlds, creating a type of magic artifact so grand and large, so vastly complex, that artifact is too insufficient a word to describe it. The Ascension Ruins are planted within a flame Empyrean turtle I defeated, one I named Shella. By attaching the ruins to such a powerful and impactful being, the pull on fate should prove even larger. Huge stores of treasure, information and knowledge that even the mightiest wizards would seek out, the Ascension Ruins bear within them enough fate to draw almost anyone to them. His voice paused, a hint of hopeful excitement appearing. Even, I hope, myself, should I fail to return with my memories fully intact, as seems likely. Your appearance here, future self, means that at least part of that succeeded. There was a brief pause. Not if I have anything to say about it. Dorian mentally grumbled back. Ukeli's voice continued, unabated. The ruins are large and have many chambers within them. Apart from preparing for my future self, they were also made to help beings become closer to achieving perfection. The knowledge and treasures I left here were truly meant to raise up those that found them. Each item comes with a trial, to prove the worthiness of the user. The ruins are a maze, in and of themselves. Of course, as the maker of that maze, there is no reason to start at the beginning of it. Thus, when you hear this message, you will find that you have been transported to the very core of the Ascension Ruins, to my own personal drafting room, where I left my own experiences and knowledge. Dorian looked around the room as he heard this, the book and sheets of paper lying about everywhere taking on new meaning. You are me, and I am you, so I think nothing more needs be said. Use the knowledge I have left behind to catch up and seek out that which I could never achieve. Ukeli's voice took on a passionate fervor, crazed and wild. That of perfection itself. Whoosh! The trembling air stilled and then vanished as the voice finished speaking, the energy that was flowing in the air fizzling off into nothingness. Leaving Dorian alone in a quiet, aged room, his eyes pensive. Well, he muttered and took a few steps forward, rubbing his hands. That was a bit much, but thanks for the convenient info, Ukeli. He gave the air a thumbs up. I still don't appreciate the whole you trying to take over my soul and murder me thing though. He flipped his thumb over to a thumbs down. As he walked forward, Dorian felt strangely drawn to one particular spot in the room. On the edge, near the entrance of the room, there was a large desk with a notebook on it. Nothing else was on the desk apart from that. He couldn't leave the room without walking past it, either. Huh, Dorian muttered as he slowly stepped up to the desk. Read it. In Dorian's head, an aged, wavering voice appeared. A voice Dorian hadn't heard in a long time. The first voice of Ukeli that he had heard, apart from the loud message that had been yelled at him upon his rebirth. You finally showed up again, huh? Dorian said aloud as he heard the voice, clenching his fists tightly. He was on full alert, not letting himself show even the tiniest opening. Read it, you will finally understand the truth. The aged voice faded away into the farthest corner of his mind as it finished speaking, slipping back into the darkest recesses. A stiff frown was frozen on Dorian's face as he looked down at the notebook, waiting a few seconds to see if the voice would return. He slowly reached down with his hand, resting it on the notebook. It was bound by some dark leather and seemed like a completely normal, non-magical book. As he picked it up, he noted that it had a nice weight to it, not too light nor too heavy. He felt the world around him seem to slow as he touched the corner of the notebook, as if to open it up. The air seemed to tremble once more, energy rising, fate rippling. Nah. He threw the notebook down and stepped backwards, shaking his head. Honestly, I don't care that much. If you want me to read it so badly, I probably shouldn't. Dorian shrugged and walked away from the notebook, ignoring it as he walked to the doorway. Thunk. When he tried to open the door, however, he found that it was sealed shut. As soon as he touched it, the door itself lit up with dark blue light. A trail of blue energy could be seen visibly moving from the door all the way to the notebook. Instinctively, somehow, Dorian knew that the door would only open if he actually opened and read the notebook. As if it contained some vital knowledge that the Ukeli of the past decided he needed to know. Really? You're going to make me do this? Dorian frowned in consternation. He looked around the room once more. As he looked at the walls, once more, knowledge instinctively came to Dorian. This room was virtually indestructible to him, at his current strength. There was no chance that he could successfully break out of it using his own power. He didn't know how he knew this, but he just did. Fine, he shrugged and walked back over to the desk, picking up the notebook. The journal logs of Ukeli Shorn. He opened the book to the first page, reading the title aloud. No way, a personal journal? He quickly opened to the next page, feeling a strange compulsion seize over him. His earlier reticence faded as he began to look at the notebook seriously, wanting to read it. If he could learn more about the personal life of this man, of Ukeli Shorn, Dorian felt like he would have a much better chance understanding what he was and why he was here. He flipped the journal open, slipping past several pages. Each page was full of tons of meticulous writing, but Dorian felt drawn to some spot further in the book. The world around him seemed to shiver as he opened to one page in particular, as if fate itself was moving forward, as if this was an important moment. The rippling effect was beneath Dorian's notice, however, as he looked on at the paper with interest. He read the personal entry, left behind by Ukeli himself, one that wasn't as neat as the other entries. It seemed to have been written with more emotion, more haste. On this day, I have failed, but I have also succeeded. I have failed in achieving perfection. I have realized that my goal is a worthy one. It is, in fact, the worthiest goal that exists. I was aware of this the moment I saw my brother lying dead upon that cross, so many years ago. Only through perfection can this reality be saved. Alas, I have failed to achieve that perfection. Not through any fault of my own. Merely, my body, my soul, they are not enough. This mortal, human shell of mine is insufficient. I need something else. My dearest love, Asra, has worked with me for years and years. Her desire to learn of every being has intersected with my own desire to track the traits of every creature, to find that which perfection may be found in. Alas, even then, after all our efforts, we still came up short. I have felt ascension calling me. If I wanted to, I could break through to the heavens, a goal that those around me see as the ultimate achievement. I have refused to. What point is there in a life in the realm of gods if I cannot even achieve perfection in the land of mortals? 4 years ago, I started to work on one of my newer projects. If I cannot achieve perfection in my human frame, then what if I achieved it using another form? Reincarnation, the great cycle of the heavens, the circle of life and death. Legends speak that every being that dies will one day be born anew, in a different body or different form. To start life anew, as a different being. Perhaps a being with a form that can achieve perfection. Such an important draw, how could I possibly ignore it? And so I began my research, using every avenue possible. Fate scries, time viewing, universal trances, meditation on various new, old, or distorted laws. And after all my years of effort, I achieved some small measure of success. Success that left me only more disappointed. When I reincarnate, despite my soul remaining the same, my entire personality itself can and will change as the memories that shaped me, the experiences that molded my heart and mind, vanish. The determination I have now to become perfect and achieve the culmination of life, it is entirely possible that I will lose this. I know this to be a fact. The next lines that Dorian read caused him to freeze, his entire body trembling as he read them over. For I have awoken the memories of my previous, reincarnated life. I was not an elite swordmaster, nor a godly wizard, not a powerful dragon nor a terrible phoenix. I was merely a weak, worthless human that achieved no real level of strength, a human that died a shameful death, without ever knowing the love of victory. In fact, I don't even think I was a native to the 30,000 worlds. My past life lived on a rather strange planet, not on any world I am familiar with. In that life, I had a different name, as well. The journal fell from Dorian's cold fingertips as he stood frozen, his entire mind reeling as the last line in the journal burnt itself into his head. My name was Dorian, Dorian Wright, from an odd planet known as Earth. Chapter 135. Needed. What? He stepped back away from the journal, falling down to his knees in shock. The world around him seemed to be closing in as he clutched at his head, his body shaking. I am you, Kelly? What? He sputtered out loud. Thud. As he spoke, the entrance to this room that had previously been locked opened up with a loud thunk, revealing a long stone hallway. In his mind, several things suddenly became clear to him. The reason why he had kept his memories intact. The reason why Kelly was able to create an ability by combining his other abilities, something that is incredibly complex and requires an intense knowledge of one's own soul to do. The reason Kelly was able to control his body without suffering from discordancy. After all, a soul could only inhabit a body if that body and soul matched perfectly. Tiny, little things that all added up. Ha ha ha, the ancient voice of Kelly in his mind laughed, reappearing once more. This time, however, it spoke with power, not a faded, quiet wavering voice, but a powerful, mighty voice. No, you are not me, I am myself. Kelly's voice in his mind carried with it a hint of supreme confidence and pride. You merely have the memories of my past reincarnated life. I don't understand. Dorian felt as if everything was collapsing around him. My memories are Ray. He was cut off. Your memories, child? They are not your memories. I have already told you. Kelly's voice seemed to be getting stronger. They are mine. His words echoed in Dorian's mind. But, why? Then why? What? Dorian couldn't understand. It is simple. Kelly began. The cycle of the heavens wipes away all memories after reincarnation. If I wanted to achieve perfection, I needed to escape the cycle. I needed to throw off the chains of fate. Kelly responded, his voice gaining more and more impact. And so I did. The research that made this possible took eons, even with the information Asra and I gathered about other creatures and beings. The complexity required thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years were required. But I did it. I found a way to accelerate time by casting my mind into my soul spell matrix, one that I had already begun to try and modify. 1,000 years could slip by in a single month or less. I succeeded. I split my soul into 88 pieces after I ascended, each filled with different memories or parts of my life, hidden in the farthest recesses. The agony I experienced is indescribable, such that even gods would have been driven mad and fallen to the wayside. Yet I persevered. I sent those split remnants through the cycle, and through them I managed to escape it and reincarnate. You, firstborn, had my greatest hopes. For the other 87, I combined my split souls with the energy and bloodline of mighty beasts, powerful creatures that I thought should prove useful upon my return. But you, firstborn, you were special. For I gave you that which surpassed all other beasts and creatures. I wanted to give you the best possible start. And what better addition than a combination with a being whose intelligence has reached the peak, who had a special connection with fate itself. Kelly's voice took on a hint of madness. I gave you my heart. Asra did not understand. But that is all right. In the millions of years I spent alone, I came to understand the truly important things. Sacrifices. They needed to be made, to reach perfection. It pained me, understand, so incredibly much to do what I did. My hand nearly failed when it came time. Grief filled his voice, unrequited. But I did what I had to do. What I needed to do. What needed to be done. Dorian's breathing was heavy as he heard all of this, his mind going to the helpful genie in his soul, realizing even more now what had happened. The fact that Mira had been drawn to him now, it all made sense. What did you do? His voice was filled with horror. I took the soul spell matrix of the love of my life, and grafted it onto you. Such a step was unprecedented, and it seems that she has retained some level of autonomy within you, instead of simply combining with your soul spell matrix as I had expected. Still, my experiment was a success. Yukali's voice took on a fanatic edge. You were a monster. Dorian muttered, his heart shivering as he heard Yukali casually discuss murdering someone he loved. It is all right, you do not understand either. I do not expect others to see what I see. Without me, the 30,000 worlds would be lost. Yukali seemed to mentally shake his head. But you will submit to me. You will give way, and allow our minds to merge fully, for my still incomplete memories to reabsorb you. Perfection must be achieved. Like hell I will. Dorian got back to his feet rather unsteadily, clutching at his head. Ha ha ha, do you still not understand? Who do you think you are? I am Doria, he began, but was interrupted. No, you aren't, you merely have my memories of my past life. Yukali interrupted him. Dorian blinked, frowning. You are not Dorian, right? The memories you hold, they are not yours. No, Dorian responded, feeling something painful in him seem to tear. You never lived that life. You are not special. Do you know what you are? Stop. Dorian clutched at his heart, his breathing turning ragged as he listened to the ancient voice in his head speak, instinctively knowing what he said was true. You are nothing more than a construct of energy. I created you from the ether itself, from thin air. The memories you hold are not your own. You are not Dorian. You are nothing. Every word echoed in Dorian's mind, crashing about in unforgettable waves. Stop. Dorian fell back to his knees as he covered his ears, yelling out loud as he tried to silence the voice. You are no one. You have never lived any life before. You have no mother. You have no father. You have no family. What you have of a soul is mine. You are nothing without me. You are worthless. A mere forgotten fragment of my memories, a pathetic, weak, foolish scrap. I created you. I made you. I am your God. The voice in Dorian's mind reached a crescendo, slamming against him. He felt himself start to lose out, as if he was starting to fade away, his mind and soul reeling. Lights flashed within, slamming down into him. His memories seemed to blur. The world around him seemed as if it was starting to fade away. What am I? His words transformed into a frail, quiet whisper. Alone, lost, a fragile spark of light that was slowly beginning to die. In the deep recesses of his soul, a slight gleam of light seemed to catch Dorian's eyes. The pale, flickering light of Will's dormant soul. No, I cannot fall now. Dorian felt a sense of self begin to reform, the world starting to come back into focus. I am needed. Do you think you can resist me? You are nothing more than a scrap of energy, a remnant of my split soul. I am a god. I have lived for eons. You are not even a real mortal. You are nothing. Who are you to stand against me? Yukali's voice slammed into Dorian once more, full of ancient fury and might. It was so loud, so overwhelmingly powerful, that it almost sent Dorian into unconsciousness. He held on, however, stubborn determination filling him. I may be nothing. His voice was ragged, his breathing harsh as he clenched his fists. But I cannot fall here. He took a deep breath. Foolish. It is only a matter of time before you fall to me. Your delay is pointless. What do you think you will do now? Dorian shut his eyes, his mind fully reasserting itself as he pushed the voice back. I will do, he began and then stopped, taking another breath. I will do what I think is right. Others are depending on me. I don't know what I am, or who I am. But I will not give up now. I am needed. He clenched his fists tighter. And you will not stop me. Dorian's words carried with them a tone of finality, bearing within it a level of strength and authority that he had never felt before. His determination seemed to crystallize as he spoke, the air around him trembling with might. Dorian's soul trembled. Faintly, he seemed to sense a strange feeling in the air. A mystic sense of energy, similar to the sensation he felt when he concentrated on the law of wrath. Ukeli, in the back of his mind, seemed to grow silent, fading. The powerful voice lost much of its strength as Dorian reasserted himself. Very well. Ukeli's voice returned to its faint, aged voice, the vast authority and power it held before nowhere to be seen. You have failed me, firstborn. Thankfully, I accounted for a situation like this. Dorian felt energy begin to concentrate in the air. He took a few steps forward as he rubbed his head, walking to the entryway of the room. His heart was heavy and his emotions running wild. He put that aside, however, as he focused on the present. This small study of Ukeli's opened up into a large, stone hallway. Off to the side, Dorian could see a large gray archway at the end of the hallway, and through that what appeared to be a huge castle. In case the firstborn should fail, I have 87 other backups. Ukeli's voice droned on in his mind. Whenever an anomaly dies, the remnants of my soul will seek out the nearest other portion, recombining. Whoosh! You have failed me. Dorian felt a gust of wind slam into his back, the energy that had formed in the air dissipating. Behind him, he felt more than heard movement. He spun around, on full alert as he looked back into the study, where two figures had appeared. As Dorian looked at them, he instinctively recognized them on a base level. For they were both like him. Anomalies. One was wearing a long set of robes, with their face covered. The other was a woman, wielding what looked like a sword made of pure light, floating in the air with legs that seemed to be made of clouds. And for that, you must die. Ukeli's ancient voice slipped away as the being left one last message echoing in his mind, leaving him alone with two other anomalies, one of which let out a ferocious-looking smile as she saw Dorian and the other anomaly. Ah, my brethren, rejoice, for I have come with the truth. I, Veritas, will share it with you. Back on top of the enormous flame Empyrean turtle, various flashes of light soared out as the entrances to the Ascension ruins activated. Shouts of pain and the sounds of violence filled the air as the large battle royale continued but began to fade away as people retreated. Several of the portals had activated abnormally early, causing a great deal of confusion to spread among those present. One by one, however, all the remaining entrances activated, transporting dozens of people into the depths of the Ascension ruins. On one entrance, several hundreds of meters down on the southernmost side of the flame Empyrean turtle, the proud figure of a beautiful, short-haired woman could be seen, wearing a ripped dress that was covered in blood. A set of vampiric teeth poked out of her mouth as she frowned, looking at a girl with tufted fox ears that was standing next to her. I'm coming to find you, Trajan. I will fix everything, Helena muttered, her eyes filled with determination. Dozens of corpses could be seen, lying near her entrance as the portal activated, transporting her away. Some humans, Ethmen, as well as a few shades and other creatures mixed in. All killed with a single blow. Hundreds of meters to the north, another group stood standing aloof in another entrance. Why the hell did that other entrance activate on its own? Regardless, it's a good thing we managed to pick up this one. Remember, do what the boss says. A red-robed wizard barked out a set of orders towards three other men standing next to him, his eyes cool. He was one of the subordinate wizards under the Blazing King, a powerful pseudo-king-class wizard specializing in fire magic. Yes, sir. Aye, as you wish. The last speaker's voice was cool and controlled, spoken by a man wearing a long, black robe that covered most of his body. Not a man, but, instead, a vampire. A voice full of pain and tiredness, with a bare, passionate gleam of hope fluttering within it, contrasting with the dead, empty eyes that Trajan was cursed with, ever since the anomaly known as Veritas blinded him. Mello, where in the heavens did you go? Trajan swore mentally as he stood with the other subordinates, his mind awash with confusion. At another entrance hundreds of meters away, a trio looked around a deserted scene. Not a soul was left in sight trying to challenge them. Good work, team, we scared them off. We must go find the Great Lord. Leader gave Aiden and Mira a thumbs up as he waved his hand, causing his bow to fade away. Aiden merely shrugged, while Mira had a pensive look on her face. Grandmother, she whispered quietly, Whoosh! The entrance activated, teleporting them away. Not too far from them, a pair of wizards looked down at an entrance portal that had already activated. Hick, whelp. Looks like we're too late. Jiro shrugged as he looked at the portal and then around the rest of the shell. Flashes of light were soaring up all along it as the other portals all activated. We would have made it to another one if you hadn't insisted on having a drinking ceremony halfway there, Taman began, his voice full of irritation before he was cut off. Calm thyself, young Taman. Life is about enjoying the little things. Don't worry, we will simply wait for the anomalies or your targets to appear outside the ruins. Jiro shrugged for a second time as he reached up onto his back, pulling off the fruit alcohol gourd. But no buts. Besides, Jiro muttered, rubbing at his chin. It might be a good idea to wait and prepare. That man is not simple. Jiro's eyes flashed as he pictured Dorian. In Jiro's mind, Dorian had an overwhelming appearance, with eyes that seemed as if they could crush anyone with a single glance, authority and power rolling off him in veritable waves. Not simple indeed. Jiro's mouth twisted in a real frown as the head of the Diamond Department, one of the strongest wizards in the 30,000 worlds, worried about how to handle Dorian should he see him again. On the opposite side of where Jiro and Taman were standing, one last group stood inside a portal entrance. A quintet of fighters, all dressed in shining white armor. The Shade Forces of the Church of Light. Damn it, Veritas, why did the other portal activate early? We barely managed to capture this one. The Holy Prince Isaac of the Church of Light griped as he stood in the center of the portal, next to Jasper and Geralt, the two most reliable fighters he had decided to take with him for this excursion, as well as two other Shade Wizards he'd brought as support. His question went unanswered. At the last possible second, as the portal was activating, a flash of movement could be seen. A black-skinned human appeared out of seemingly nowhere, standing just within range of the Holy Prince's portal entrance. Greetings, almsgiver. Pardon this intrusion, but I noticed you had room. The man spoke aloud, his open white shirt and pants flapping slightly. Before Isaac or anyone could respond, all of them staring at the man in shock, the entrance activated, teleporting them away. All around the Great Flame Empyrean Turtle, the various portals lit up and activated, transporting dozens of powerful beings into the mysterious Ascension ruins. The fate that gathered around these mysterious ruins in this moment was momentous, carrying with it implications that would shape the entire future of the 30,000 worlds. As all of this was going on, just a few dozen miles away, a small monkey let out a satisfied burp. Ah, now that was tasty. Sun Wukong smiled as he tossed aside a massive, 10-meter-long bone that had been stripped completely clean of meat, smacking his lips. His eyes flashed as he looked out into the distance, where a gargantuan turtle was currently standing, floating atop the magma sea. Now, time to get down to business. He clapped his hands together, his body blurring as he began to run towards the giant beast. Chapter 136, Valor. The law that Dorian had studied, to some basic level, was the law of wrath. One of the 7 great laws of the demon race, and a powerful law that could empower attacks, among other things. It was a law that had been discovered many years ago, one that was once well known when demons walked the 30,000 worlds in their multitudes. While it had fallen to the wayside now, and was a law few would recognize, it was still a strong law. When Dorian had rejected Ukeli, something had changed. For the first time, Dorian had firmly thrown himself off the path that Ukeli had prepared for him. Dorian had chosen to walk his own way, instead of giving up his consciousness and life to merge with Ukeli. While Ukeli's goals and dreams were huge, and the man had achieved incredible success in his life so far, they did not match up with who Dorian was. Perhaps Dorian wasn't truly the Dorian he thought he was. The memories he held, if Ukeli was to be believed, were merely that. Memories of a life he had never lived. To Dorian, though, it didn't matter. He was who he was and he would be who he would be. He would not live his life under someone else's orders or commands. He would walk his own path. The moment he realized this and rejected Ukeli, Dorian felt a strange source of energy in the air. A sensation of power that was part of the natural universes, something that had been invisible to him until this very moment. A sensation that was similar to the feeling Dorian sensed when he focused on the law of wrath. A mystical source of energy that flowed invisibly, accessible to only those that could sense it. A concept that existed and could be tapped using one's force of will. Dorian had discovered a law. Laws in the 30,000 worlds were mystic concepts. Some laws were very widespread, like the law of fire, the law of might, the law of cutting. Mastering laws like these was easier due to wise warriors or wizards of old having walked them before, leaving behind records of their journey. Other laws were far more abstruse or hidden, like Vicehead Taman's law of solidity. These types of laws were often not fully explored, and walking them could be difficult. The power they gifted, however, could be both strange and mighty, varying widely. There were a virtually infinite number of varying laws, with most having never been discovered. The law Dorian had touched on was an incredibly unique one. It was one that was extremely difficult to even sense, one that required an incredible sense of fortitude and willpower, with a staunch refusal to give in to even the direst of threats, all while having a high level of aptitude and an extremely powerful physical body. The law of valor. Whoosh! Energy gathered around Dorian as his senses were flooded with a sense of mystical power. The world around Dorian seemed to transform, particles of light flashing. Energy poured in from the air into Dorian's body as he experienced a baptism of the laws of the universe. This baptism took only a split second, unlike the baptism Dorian experienced when he first touched upon the law of wrath. Dorian's understanding of that law was still at a rudimentary level. However, because he had touched upon a law to the level of Lord class, his soul was able to handle the energy of another law with ease. In the 30,000 worlds, it was extremely rare to find someone that practiced more than one law. This was primarily because of how incredibly difficult it was to even sense a single law, let alone sense two. Once you sensed one law, that law's presence on your mind and soul would usually become overpowering. It would make it very difficult to sense other laws in a direct manner. Picking and choosing what law you wished to study was an important decision for any being. Whoosh! The flood of energy vanished as quickly as it had appeared. At the same time, however, Dorian could firmly sense two stores of energy flowing around him. One that was angry, raging, full of towering might and unspeakable force. The law of wrath. The other that was steady and calm, full of solid power and unwavering fortitude. The law of valor. Dorian instinctively knew the name of the law as he felt energy swell within him. Dorian. Soul status. Soul stage. Lord class. Pseudo king. Health. Perfect. Energy. 92,213 108,221. Oh my gosh! Dorian exclaimed as he hurriedly checked over his status, his eyes widening in shock. My energy level, it basically doubled? How is that possible? When Dorian first experienced a baptism for the law of wrath, his soul had slowly adapted to the law energy and gradually enhanced his strength. In terms of raw energy, he had grown substantially stronger, but he had only moved from the early Lord class to the middle Lord class in terms of power. Just obtaining a rudimentary understanding, merely the initial baptism of the laws, from the law of valor, however, had massively increased his strength all the way to the pseudo-king level. The difference lay in the laws, as well as in Dorian's soul. The law of wrath was a law that almost entirely focused on attack power and overwhelming force. Dorian's understanding of it was rather low, but he had managed to glean this much from it. The law of valor, on the other hand, centered around endurance and strength. On building up a being to reach a level of undying power, to the point where nothing could keep them down. The energy that rushed into Dorian's soul filled it to the limit that his soul could accept, filling it while at the same time strengthening it with the properties of the law of valor. Dorian's soul had constantly been undergoing significant growth thanks to his unique soul spell matrix. The constant evolution of forms, growing stronger and stronger, had pushed his physical strength up greatly, and, bit by bit, grown his soul spell matrix and soul. This meant his soul could handle a large amount of energy. And the law of valor allowed for that energy to rush within him and strengthen him, in a way the violent energy of the law of wrath could not. It was similar to Vicehead Taman's law of solidity and the Vicehead's own abnormally high strength. The Vicehead had an extremely powerful physical body, partly because of his constant training, but also partly because half of it was made out of a network of ether diamond. This had allowed him to delay entering king class as he sought to gain a more perfect understanding of the law of solidity while also enhancing his power. The law of solidity was abstruse and, like Dorian's law of valor, it focused on physical enhancement and endurance, though in a very different way. Hup! Dorian let out a breath as he felt the rapid increase in strength. At the same time, he snapped back to the present, staring at the situation in front of him. "Ah, my brethren, rejoice, for I have come with the truth. I, Veritas, will share it with you." A hooded woman floating half a meter above the ground was the speaker. Her eyes glowed a faint white color, and an almost holy aura seemed to surround her. Instead of a regular pair of legs, her lower half was insubstantial, made up of shimmering clouds of gray light, with a few small wavering tendrils of smoke drifting to and fro. Species: Veritas. Class: King Class, Early. Maximum Energy Level: 275,112. Veritas? I don't know the species. She has the same name as her species? Dorian looked at her in confusion, not understanding her words. She was an anomaly like him, however, and seemed a bit stronger. After meeting all these monstrously powerful beings like the head of the Diamond Department, Aiden, or even Leader, meeting a being with an energy level only in the late 200,000s didn't seem that frightening anymore. That said, as Dorian looked at the odd, unsettling being, he got the feeling that the energy level of the creature wasn't what made it dangerous. He was about to look up the description of the Veritas species when his thought process was interrupted as the other anomalies spoke up. "My fellow anomalies. Ah, to meet more of my brethren. Such a delight." A low, rich voice resounded as the hooded anomaly took his hood off, revealing a beautiful gold-skinned humanoid, with slightly pointed ears and long, gorgeous golden hair. The being's face was just faintly masculine, one of sheer, utter beauty. Species: Ancestral Vampire. Class: Lord Class, Pseudo-King. Maximum Energy Level: 156,221. Another strong one, though he is weaker than the girl. His species is one that I obtained, though didn't evolve. Dorian had obtained an Ancestral Vampire bloodline option, but had decided to go with the Wrath Vampire instead. Perhaps he would revisit the Ancestral Vampire, to see what other combinations he could use it for in the future. It seemed like a powerful one. "You wish to share the truth with me, brethren?" The Ancestral Vampire turned to look at Veritas with a warm smile. His eyes contained a friendly light, as if he was actually pleased to be speaking to another anomaly in such an abrupt situation. "Yes, the way, the truth, and the light." Veritas nodded, a smile appearing on her face in return. Her eyes were colder, however, almost inhuman. "Well, you see, I'm actually putting together a team of us anomalies. We have to stick together in this cruel universe." The Ancestral Vampire began, nodding cheerfully. "Huh, that sounds familiar," Dorian thought, his eyes narrowing. "If you are willing to join my team, I'd be happy to listen to whatever truth you wish to share with me." The handsome vampire put on a winning smile as he finished speaking, looking at Veritas expectantly. Dorian maintained his silence throughout all of this, slowly taking a few steps back until he was in the entrance of the doorway, staring at the two anomalies. They were ignoring him at the moment, focusing on each other. "Join a team?" Veritas' voice seemed to contain a hint of confusion as she looked at the Ancestral Vampire. "Yes, a joining will happen. You will join me with the truth." Veritas shook her head, warmth and care filling her voice as she spoke. At the same time, a pure, holy aura began to rise around her. "Ah." The Ancestral Vampire's eyes narrowed as he looked at Veritas, a disappointed expression appearing on his face. "You're like those two, huh? First that ridiculous rhyming 11th born, and then that irritatingly stubborn other one that refused to see the reality of the 30,000 worlds." Irritation, tinged with a hint of genuine sadness, filled his voice as he spoke. At the same time, an aura began to form around the vampire. One that seemed to multiply exponentially as it was released, an odd, unnerving aura that gave off a sense of strength that seemed to be coming from multiple sources. "If it is truth you want, then it is truth you will find." The Ancestral Vampire smiled, his eyes taking on a ferocious appearance. "I, Mello, will knock some sense into you, my brethren." Whoosh! The two auras collided, energy running rampant in the small study. Dorian took one glance at this and then made his decision. The power from the law of valor filled his body with internal, tough strength. The brave energy in him ran flush now as he gathered it up, preparing to take action. Hup! He let out a small breath as he concentrated, his body tensing. Courageously, without even a hint of hesitation, Dorian turned around and ran away. Chapter 137. The Door. Dorian could try to bluff the two anomalies and it was possible he might succeed. But as Mello started talking, Dorian had recognized him. When the two other anomalies, the one called Veritas and one of Mello's clones, had started to unleash their auras, Dorian had made a split-second decision. He was right at the cusp of his entire journey, a long voyage with a singular goal: to save the life of a friend. These two anomalies could duke it out all they wanted, for all he cared. What mattered most to him right now was reviving Will. After that, he would move forward one step at a time. As they said on Earth, discretion is the better part of valor. Thud, thud. Dorian's feet sounded off as he ran down the stone hallway, sprinting away from Euclid's study. As he made a tactical retreat, he took in the area around him. The hallway was drab and not very long, only a couple dozen meters. There were a few other doors to other rooms on the sides, but what Dorian was most interested in lay in front of him. An arched opening that led to a large castle. In just seconds, he crossed the distance all the way to the arch. As soon as he touched it, however, the world around Dorian shivered. The view through that archway rippled, as if he was touching a pool of water. Huh? Is it a portal of some sort? Dorian's first thought was that this was some type of portal or transportation tool. When he stuck his hand through it, he could feel warm air brushing on his fingertips, a breeze that didn't exist on this side of the arch flowing. Boom! Whoosh! Behind Dorian, an explosion of energy blasted out from the study as a fight broke out between the two other anomalies. Well, Dorian thought, rubbing his chin. At least I grabbed this. From his spatial ring, Dorian withdrew a bound collection of aged paper, an old journal, that had been pierced by a small blade in its lower right half. Euclid's journal. In the moment where he had spun around to flee, Dorian had flicked out a small dagger, stabbing the journal he had tossed aside. Right after, he'd activated his basic magnetic manipulation ability, pulling the journal towards him. He'd then booked it, all in one smooth motion, stuffing the journal into his spatial ring. It's a little damaged, but it should be readable just fine. The knife he had thrown had been one of more than a dozen he'd picked up when he resupplied several days ago. It was small, only half an inch or so long and even thinner. Boom! Another explosion of energy boiled out into the hallway as the two anomalies really began to go at it. Dorian stuffed the journal back into his spatial ring and then walked forward, his heart filled with determination. I'm coming for you, Will. He muttered aloud, his eyes fierce and determined. He walked completely through the portal arch and was instantly transported away. Behind him, the sounds of combat continued as Mello's clone fought against the king-class anomaly Veritas. Leaving no one aware of the figures that could be seen moving near the base of the castle, where a pair of vampires were currently facing off, a fox-eared girl in tow. Trajan, what do you think you're doing? You can't just leave like this. Helena's voice was rough but full of authority as she glared at her teammate, a vampire she considered a friend. She was standing on the outskirts of a massive stone castle. Around her, a barren, rocky landscape spread out, a few dead trees dotting it. A large, 10-meter-wide moat stood between her and the castle. The sky above was covered in fog, making the ceiling impossible to see. Likewise, the distance was shrouded in fog as well, meaning the only thing visible was the nearby castle and the barren landscape. The castle was made of stone and covered in cool streaks of white energy. As Helena glanced at it, she noticed that she felt vaguely threatened by that energy. It seemed like scaling the castle or trying to go over it would be a very bad idea. Stop following me, Helena. I'm doing what I need to do. Trajan's voice was hoarse as he looked at Helena. He was standing on the other side of the moat, away from her and near the castle. When the portals activated, everyone inside them was transported away. Trajan had found himself standing outside the castle, separated from his group. It didn't matter what entrance you stood at. All beings in one would be teleported randomly, regardless of grouping. When he'd appeared on the ground, he had coincidentally run into Helena. The other vampire had appeared not far from him and spotted him in the distance. You can't get revenge on your own. I understand that Probus' death hit you hard, but, Helena began, her voice urgent. She was cut off, however. I'm not trying to get revenge. Trajan interjected, his voice calm and cool. I am going to bring Probus back. Trajan's voice contained fervor within them, his fists clenched. Helena stared back at him, a confused expression on her face. Trajan, Probus has fallen. You cannot bring back the dead? She began, shaking her head. No, Helena. Here the dead can be brought back. I know this for a fact. Trajan gave her a look and then turned around, heading towards one of the several entrances to the great walls surrounding the large stone castle. Each entrance was several meters wide and tall, sparse holes in the great fortress that stood proudly open. Trajan, you know that can't be true. Helena returned, shaking her head. Trajan ignored her, however, as he continued to walk away. Trajan, damn it, she called out after him, slamming her fist into her palm in frustration. The air clapped around her at the impact, shivering from the force. It is true, I needed to be. Trajan whispered quietly, his form blurring as he ran forward towards the stone entrance. He vanished through it, disappearing. Helena watched him go, her face bitter and pensive as she tried to figure out what to do. Why would you even bother trying? He clearly doesn't want your help. Ariel's voice was quiet as she spoke out, tugging at the collar that was locked around her neck. Helena turned and glared at her, shaking her head. I'm not going to give up on him just because he doesn't want my help. I can fix this, she replied, turning to look back towards the moat and entrance. A small bridge crossed the moat just a couple dozen meters away. She began to move towards it, motioning for Ariel to follow. With the magic collar wrapped around Ariel's neck, the Lightsworn Fox had little choice. But what are you doing, Trajan? You can't bring the dead back to life. Not even here on Magma. As she was talking to herself, she abruptly cut herself off as a memory flashed into her mind. A memory of a man she admired talking to her, telling her how he was going to rescue his friend. No, not just rescue. He was going to revive his friend. Here, on the planet Magmor. Dorian should be here, somewhere. And he will know. She spoke aloud, her eyes alighting with excitement. If Trajan believed there was a way to revive Probus here, then there probably was something to that. Dorian had said he was going to revive his friend on Magmor. There couldn't be such a coincidence. Going by the time they had traveled, it was likely that this was the place Dorian had been talking about. In fact, it was possible he was here right now. Trajan, wait up, I will help you. Immediately Helena burst into a sprint, running forward. Ariel ran after her, her chest heaving. Not from exertion, however, but from a single word. When Helena called out the name, Dorian, Ariel's eyes had widened in shock, her mouth twisting. Dorian? Her eyes became clouded as she ran after Helena, apprehension filling them. The Ascension ruins are filled with a variety of trials and tribulations. Each one is intended to test the knowledge, skill, or willpower of a participant. Dorian read the line from the journal over in his head, pondering it as he looked around the entrance to the grand, energy-covered castle. He had appeared outside the castle, in the middle of a barren landscape when he walked through the arch. It seemed to have fully transported him, without leaving him a way back to the hidden area, at least not directly. This castle in front of me should be the ruins themselves. Dorian muttered, rubbing his chin. The amount of work and effort that went into crafting these ruins, to make them as faithful as possible, must have been obscene. Ukeli had been extremely devoted to his efforts. Well, I might as well go through it. Dorian took a few steps forward. He was standing in one of the entrances to the castle, after crossing a moat to get here. The entrance was a gray stone hole, almost as if it had been bored straight into the castle itself, with no decoration or other indications of a door. At the end of the short entrance, Dorian could see an open courtyard. It was small, only a dozen or so meters wide and long. There didn't seem to be an obvious entrance or exit to the courtyard, at least not that Dorian could see from here. Without waiting, Dorian walked straight through the entrance. Whoosh! As soon as he passed into the courtyard, a breeze swept past him. At the same time, he heard a voice go off in his head. Welcome, Challenger, to the Ascension Ruins. Test your knowledge, skill, and strength, seeking out the rewards laid out for the descendants of the 30,000 worlds. Empower yourselves, strive for perfection, and reach for ascension. A welcoming message rang out, full of promise and epic potential. As Dorian heard this, however, the words faded to the background as he recognized the voice itself. Osra, that's you. The genie in his soul spell matrix did not respond, not unexpectedly. The voice he heard was the exact same as Osra's, however. They really did work together on this. only to have him kill you. Pity for the poor woman filled Dorian's heart. You are the 48th challenger to arrive. You will automatically be transported to the grand courtyard, where all the other challengers are waiting. Prepare yourself. The voice spoke in Dorian's head again. Hold on a second. Dorian began, his eyes widening. This was not part of his plan. Before he could object further, however, light flashed around him in a crescendo, temporarily blinding him. The world seemed to stretch around him as, once more, he teleported, vanishing from the small courtyard he'd been standing in. Sound seemed to stretch off and vanish as his senses went haywire. Hup! Dorian grunted as he felt himself land. He blinked his eyes furiously, clearing them as sound returned. Looking on at a large, 100-meter-wide courtyard. The ground was made of finely cut stone in this courtyard, carved in intricate patterns. White energy floated about 50 meters overhead, cutting off access to the sky. The walls rose all the way up to the white energy, covered in artistic depictions of angels soaring into the sky, dragons flying freely, phoenixes rising from the ashes, and various other epic legends. At the front of the courtyard, and the only entrance or exit that Dorian could see, was a giant, 20-meter-tall doorway, covered in gold and silver. The doorway was imposing, bearing a heavy presence, almost as if it was a powerful warrior instead of, well, a door. The walls next to the door were translucent and misty, allowing the rest of the large castle to be visible, giving off a grand image of splendor. The courtyard was not empty. Far from it, it was actually filled with a variety of people. Humans, shades, a few other races. Some standing together, others apart. About 20 people in total. All of them standing about, looking at a large, 20-meter-tall doorway that led to the main entrance of the castle. As soon as Dorian appeared, several of the other challengers turned and looked at him. Welcome, challenger. The first challenge before you awaits. The door of splendor. Pass through it to be rewarded. The voice in Dorian's head echoed forth as it informed him of the challenge, though not giving him much to work with. Despite being the 48th challenger, according to the ruins Asra, there were only 20 people left here. The other 28 must have already moved on. Dorian almost completely ignored this, however, his eyes drawn to a sight that left him shocked. Off on the side of the courtyard, a few figures could be seen standing aloof. Two of these figures were currently talking to each other in an animated fashion. One was a short-haired vampire, wearing a set of leather armor, while the other appeared to be a blind vampire wizard wearing a set of gray robes. Helena, I found you. Dorian's heart leapt up cheerfully as he saw her, wanting to run forward and declare himself instantly. She was currently talking to another figure Dorian recognized, Trajan, one of her allies. The figure behind Helena, however, was what nearly sent him into shock. As that, Ariel? Anger and confusion were the only emotions Dorian felt as he caught sight of the Lightsworn fox that had betrayed him and left him for dead on Blizzeria. What are you doing with Helena? Protectiveness filled Dorian as he saw this, his fists clenching. Whoosh! Just as he was about to step forward, however, a blast of air rang out as a new figure appeared. A man wearing a set of faded gray leather armor with the insignia of a golden sun emblazoned upon it. The man, no. Dorian corrected himself as he studied him. The shade looked around the courtyard, scanning everyone. As the shade's eyes ran over him, Dorian felt a cool, nervous feeling wash over him, as if he was facing a powerful foe. The shade carried himself with a sense of royalty and authority, almost as if he was a king or prince. The shade's eyes seemed to light up as they landed on Helena's group off to the side. Specifically, as they landed on Ariel. The air around him abounded with might, a pure, kingly aura unleashing. Species. Shade. Class. King class, middle. Maximum energy level. 1,102,630. Ah, we meet again, little fox. I'm afraid you won't be escaping from me so easily this time. Chapter 138. Punch. Challengers, please step up to the door of splendor and challenge yourself. Only if you possess a powerful force of will can you find success and safely pass through. The rewards for this trial can be found on the other side. Bravely step forth, into the history of the 30,000 worlds. If you cannot pass the door after 3 hours, you will be expelled from the ruins. The ruins Asra voice echoed out loud, coming out of nowhere as she announced what the challenge was in more detail. The large silver and gold door seemed to flash, radiating an almost welcoming wave of energy. Dorian put all of this to the side, however, as he took record of the situation before him. Helena is in danger. Dorian instantly recognized that. His heart dropped and his brain went into overdrive. It was clear that the shade was targeting Ariel, the Lightsworn Fox. He must be part of the group of shades that was chasing after Ariel before, back on Blizzaria. Probably justifiably, too, from what Dorian knew. Ariel herself had told him that she'd killed several shades, though Dorian guessed that the intentions of those now dead shades hadn't been honest either. Still, it was clear that the focus of this shade was Ariel. But Dorian knew Helena. She had bravely run out in front of an enormous king-class dragon to stop it from attacking a city full of people she didn't know. There was no chance she wouldn't try to protect Ariel too. Damn it, Helena, why do you have to be so foolishly nice? Dorian thought, ignoring the fact that he did the exact same thing when it came to that dragon. You can't have her. Helena proved Dorian's point as she stepped away from Trajan and in front of Ariel. A heavy aura of strength began to form around her, her law of might shining forth. Huh? Is she stronger now? Dorian eyed the female vampire. Species: True Vampire. Class: Lord, Pseudo-King. Maximum energy level: 156,201. Wow, that is a ton stronger. Dorian's eyes widened. Helena's strength had exploded, jumping to be one of the strongest Lord-class experts Dorian had seen, apart from the freakish diamond wizard Taman. That said, it wasn't enough. Step aside, girl. I have no quarrel with you, despite your alliance with those two anomalies. The shade's voice was commanding. A mighty, king-class aura burst forth from him, pressing down on everyone present. Around them, everyone else in the courtyard backed away. All of the other experts in here were at the Lord class, and most of them had been concentrating on the huge door, as if studying it, before this interruption. She is not just a girl, you night-crawling mutt. She's a respectable woman. Trajan's voice echoed back as he stepped forward as well, a cool, nature-like aura wrapping around him in refreshing waves. No, you two are outclassed. Dorian thought, frowning fiercely. The shade was extremely strong, the two most likely didn't stand a chance. The shade seemed to shrug. Whatever. His aura bursts forth to the maximum, bright light and powerful strength crashing down on Helena and Trajan. The duo weathered the impact, looking worse for wear. Helena winced, biting her lip slightly. Her hand reached for her spatial ring, as if to pull something from it. Dorian felt his heart go cold. Instinctively, the two laws that he was studying seemed to appear more powerfully in his mind. Dorian tapped on these laws at the same time. Angry, rage-filled energy from the law of wrath covered his body in a reddish haze, full of deadly power. Cool but strong energy from the law of valor matched up with the offensive energy from the law of wrath, supporting his body and empowering him. The energy from the two laws were not perfect matches. Wrath and valor were two very dissimilar concepts. However, Dorian's force of will shoved the two together, refusing to let either one fail. Each of the two forces tried to take over Dorian's emotions, energy from the law of wrath trying to fill him with raw fury while energy from the law of valor tried to fill him with unwavering courage. The two combined, forming a type of righteous anger in Dorian's heart. Dorian felt himself gain a huge amount of offensive power. However, as he looked at the shade in front of him, he knew it wasn't enough. The gap between them was wide. A mid-king class shade, one that appeared to be powerful even among other king-class beings. More, Dorian activated his moving force ability. Energy flowed into his body with every step he took as he began to walk forward. The mystical, intricate ability allowed him to harness his own momentum, turning it into a source of energy to empower his attacks. More, Dorian activated his perfect body ability. The world around him lost some of its color. At the same time, his wrath vampire body warped, every part of it becoming fully adaptable and strong, as if it had been trained for eons to achieve perfection. He felt energy practically hemorrhage itself from his soul. He ignored that all, however, as he focused on the present. He had a single thought in his mind. You will not harm a hair on her head. For the first time in a very long time, Dorian went all out. Whoosh! Thundering winds. Flush gale. Dorian activated one of the mystic martial arts he had left in his memories, one he had used before. One of the fastest movement techniques Ukeli had known. Energy flooded into Dorian's legs, and in his mind, he pictured himself soaring through the sky, moving forward while standing atop a great gust of wind. Dorian moved. Dorian's perception of time had been so enhanced by his increased strength and perfect body ability that, as his body blurred forward, he felt as if the world around him was moving in slow motion. Time itself seemed to have dilated as he dashed forward towards the shade that was threatening Helena. Against his expectations, the shade noticed him. Despite Dorian's overwhelming speed, the shade managed to turn its head around and see him, the man's eyes widening in real shock. Particles of light began to swarm around the shade, quickly starting to form a set of armor. Not forming fast enough, however, to block Dorian's attack. Rumbling earth. Boulder breaker. Dorian punched out in a simple-looking, straight punch, his arm aimed towards the chest of the shade. His movements were fast and precise, the knowledge and skill associated with this mystic martial art among those left in his mind. This punch drew upon the energy of his soul, using his soul spell matrix to power it. As the energy flowed through him, Dorian mentally pictured himself smashing apart a huge, 10-meter large stone boulder. The shade somehow, impossibly, managed to raise up an arm to deflect Dorian's attack. It wasn't that Dorian was too slow. Far from it, in his current form, he was ridiculously fast. Powered by an incomplete divine ability, his moving force ability, the strength of 2 extremely strong laws, and the body of an incredibly fierce wrath vampire, not to mention the colossally strong mystic martial arts created from one of the greatest martial arts geniuses in the history of the 30,000 worlds. Dorian was virtually a monster in his own right now. However, of all the opponents that Dorian had ever faced, this shade was simply the fastest. In terms of attack speed and reaction speed, he was probably much faster than the other shade, Jasper, that Dorian had fought against on Blizzeria, and that shade had moved at a ridiculously fast speed. As the shade raised its arm, Dorian smiled in a grin that showed his fanged teeth. "I command you to miss." He drew upon his will, commanding fate to obey him. Energy flooded out of Dorian's soul, from his abilities, his movements, his commanding fate, everything. Dorian ignored this as he focused purely on his goal. The shade's arm moved in a perfect arc, ready to deflect Dorian's blow. At the last second, however, the energy from Dorian's aura seemed to interact slightly with the energy in the shade's aura, in a negative, shocking way. This made the shade flinch, just a tiny amount, at the unexpected intrusion. That flinch raised the arm of the shade by about a millimeter, just enough to offset its defensive angle. Boom! Whoosh! The shade's body was flung away from Dorian like a rag doll as his punch landed and blasted past the arm, slamming directly into the shade's chest. The ground beneath Dorian cracked, shards of stone flinging into the air as he came to a stop, energy writhing off his body like steam as his chest heaved from exertion. The mystic martial arts left behind by Ukeli were all extremely powerful. Every move Dorian had previously used still laid firmly in his mind. While he didn't have access to all or even most of Ukeli's martial techniques, he could still use the ones he'd attacked with before. Perhaps not at the level that Ukeli did, but still easily enough to achieve mastery. At least he had gained one good thing from the memories that had been planted in his mind. Thud! The shade's body slammed into the side of the courtyard, cracking it. If the ground and walls had been made of regular stone here, the entire courtyard would have been obliterated due to the sheer force of the impact. The shade's aura and particles of light flattened down like a pancake at the blow, vibrating with almost a whimper as the attack settled. Shock and fear swept over the crowd of Lord-class spectators as they witnessed this, all of them falling back away from the door. Got him, but he's not really down yet. Tough bugger. Dorian's eyes narrowed as he looked at his fist, feeling it sting, and then over at the downed shade. Abruptly, he turned to the side, looking at Helena, Trajan, and Ariel. "A friend sent me to help you guys out. Go take the door trial, I will handle this." Dorian opted to not reveal himself, not in front of the spectators as well as the shade he had just attacked. Giving away his identity, even in a subtle manner, could come back to bite him. It also meant he couldn't greet Helena like he'd wanted to. He quashed the bitterness in his heart, however, as he stayed focused on the present. The trio didn't need any encouragement, nor did they bother asking questions. Even if Dorian was lying, the situation at hand was a dangerous one, and taking this seeming miracle to escape was the best option they had. Helena spat out a hurried thanks as she retreated, Ariel in tow. Trajan simply gave Dorian a nod. The trio sprinted over towards the door of splendor, arriving in front of it. Dorian took his eyes off of them as he turned to look back at the shade, feeling an unsettling, eerie aura start to appear. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Behind Dorian, 3 blasts of wind rang out as Helena, Trajan, and Ariel all vanished, moving past and into the door of splendor, activating whatever trial Ukeli had set there. Their bodies were nowhere to be seen, transported away. Whoosh! Blinding light burst forth from the spot where the shade had been smashed as an apparition appeared. A beautiful angel made of pure light appeared out of thin air, standing above the downed shade. The angel looked down at the shade, concern present on her face. That was a good punch. You took one of my lives. A pained voice echoed out as the particles of light faded slightly, revealing the bedraggled image of the shade that had been threatening Helena. His face was covered in streaks of black blood. The warrior was clutching at his right arm as if it was broken, cradling it. As he stood up, the particles of light that had faded surrounded him, flashing as they began to flow into his body. At the same time, the angelic apparition vanished. Before Dorian's very eyes, the shade began to heal at a visible rate. Name thyself, attacker. You do not have the choice to step aside. Do you have any idea how hard it is to create an angelic life? The shade's kingly aura burst forth once more. I am Holy Prince Isaac of the Church of Light, born in the lands of the Shade Commune. Who are you to attack me? Isaac sounded genuinely curious as he set the break in his right arm, moving it into a position it could heal from. His voice was gentle, but contained a hint of danger within it. Well, I can't tell him who I am now, that's for sure. As Dorian realized who he had just attacked, an apparent major figure in a major power, he instantly made a snap decision. Who am I? Dorian bellowed, his voice containing pure, raw confidence. HMPH. It is you who no longer has the choice to step aside. Dorian took a threatening step forward. As he took that step, the rest of the onlookers, all Lord-class experts that had fought hard to get a spot to investigate the Ascension ruins, seemed to take that as a cue. Almost as one, all of them rushed towards the door of splendor, immediately wanting to flee the scene before Dorian and Isaac went on a rampage, fighting a true battle. Isaac's eyes narrowed as Dorian spoke. I am a close ally of Vice-Head Taman of the Diamond Department. Dorian thumped on his chest loudly. Do you dare question the authority of the BORREL autarky, foolish shade? Far away, outside of the Ascension ruins, Vice-Head Taman sneezed, rubbing at his nose furiously. Are you all right there, Taman? I can understand how you might catch a cold on this world of eternal fire and lava. Head Jiro looked over at the vice-head. The head of the Diamond Department was currently sitting at a small and dainty table, one that was covered in a lacy tablecloth. Several different-sized shot glasses and cups were distributed on the table evenly, all filled with different types of alcohol. Jiro had been licking his lips as he stared over the delicious feast of alcohol, putting up a small drinking ceremony to pass the time as they waited for their targets to exit the Ascension ruins. I'm fine. I'm not sure what that was, Taman said, shaking his head. It almost felt like someone was wishing me bad luck, somewhere far away. He shrugged. How odd, Jiro replied, picking up a shot glass. You know what we should do? We should drink to it, right? Taman glared at his rather irresponsible department head in an annoyed fashion, once more cursing his own luck. How on earth could he have known how irresponsible and undedicated the head of the Diamond Department was, so many years ago when he first decided to practice diamond magic? Jiro looked back at Taman in consternation. HMPH, as I was saying, quite odd. Jiro shrugged. Yes, it was. Taman grunted and shrugged back, a second time. I agree, pretty weird. Sun Wukong said, nodding his head. Jiro nodded back, as did Taman. The two went back to their waiting for a moment, Taman aimlessly pacing back and forth while Jiro stared at a particular goblet, a mesmerized look on his face. A split second later, however, both Jiro and Taman spun around, going on full guard, shock painting their faces as their eyes popped. Both of them looked over to where Sun Wukong had appeared, not having detected his presence in the slightest. Oh, hi, by the way. Sun Wukong waved nonchalantly at the two, sitting down peacefully on a rock not far from them. Nice to meet you too. Chapter 139. tiny. After all of that, I only managed to take down one of his lives? What weird magic or law does he study to have multiple lives? Dorian mentally repeated what the Shade Prince said, feeling a headache coming on. Dorian, soul status, soul stage. Lord class, pseudo king. Health. Perfect. Energy. 72,213 112,221. He winced slightly as he checked his status. He'd depleted a massive amount of energy in just a few moments. He wasn't sure what his biggest expense had been. Either manipulating the fate of the Shade Prince in combat or maintaining his perfect body ability. Even the energy he drew upon from the laws of wrath and valor was taxing on his soul, wearing him down. Either way, he wasn't at a level where he could maintain this level of combat for too long. He took a quick glance around, noting that all the onlookers had fled. It appeared that all the ones left behind had been studying the Door of Splendor carefully, intent on taking the full 3-hour time limit to prepare. Sorry gang, he mentally sent them an apology for scaring them off. Dorian maintained his perfect body ability, but dropped off the moving force ability. He kept his focus purely on the dangerous shade in front of him, watching the prince's every movement. The autarky again, huh? Isaac muttered, his eyes cold as his mind flashed back to the arrogant diamond wizard he'd encountered. Did you think the commune would just fall over after hearing that? Isaac's voice gained a sense of grandeur and strength as he spoke, an aura of light fluttering around him. The Holy Prince of the Church of Light studied a law that was considerably difficult to master. The law of holy light. The law was related to the law of light, but also to the law of reincarnation, and several other abstruse laws. It held incredibly mystical properties, but its chief powers lay in two aspects. One was in speed enhancement with an increased talent in regards to light magic. The other was in a mystical, unexplainable ability to die and come back to life, through the use of angelic lives. Apparitions that took a vast amount of time and effort to construct, ones that could heal or reverse virtually any injury, even a fatal one. Isaac focused on the first aspect of his law as he launched himself at Dorian, raw energy running flush through the Holy Prince's veins. A pair of wings that appeared to be made out of pure light appeared on his back, increasing his acceleration. At the same time, a full set of white armor covered the wizard, giving him a fierce, mighty appearance. A glowing, gold and white lance appeared in the prince's hand, one he immediately stabbed forward with, hurtling straight at Dorian. Whoosh! Dorian, in his perfect body state, could just barely see Isaac blast through the air towards him at an incredible pace. Okay. Well, bluffing didn't work this time. Still, I can handle this. Dorian mentally shrugged, refusing to let himself panic as he put his full focus into survival. Boom! An explosion echoed forth as Isaac's lance slammed into the spot Dorian had been standing at, piercing several inches into the ground before halting. Energy and wind ran rampant in the courtyard, shredding the air to and fro. While the ground and walls were incredibly reinforced, the air itself was still the same as normal air. What? Isaac muttered, his eyes wide in shock. He had missed. Or, rather, his target had disappeared, causing his attack to hit thin air. Whoosh! Isaac leapt forward, feeling a horrible burning sensation flood over his back, melting through his white armor in a split second. He flipped over and rolled on the ground, particles of light flashing as he retreated. A small, black-skinned humanoid stood, covered in black flames. Dorian's Ifrit form. In the moment that Isaac had attacked, Dorian had shifted into his red salamander form. At the same time, he'd activated his condense ability and reverted his growth, becoming extremely tiny. This made it seem as if he had teleported from Isaac's perspective. After the attack missed, he'd instantly reformed, but this time in his Ifrit form. He'd taken that moment to breathe out a flood of black flames, sending the deadly dragonfire melting into the back of the Holy Prince. You bastard, you teleported? Dragonfire? How? Isaac's chest heaved from exertion as he forced himself to come on guard towards Dorian, just now managing to extinguish the flames. The powerful, and completely unexpected, dragonfire had melted through his armor and any other protection he had, horribly burning through his back and charring his internal organs. Whoosh! Once more, an angelic apparition appeared in the air floating above the shade. The apparition looked down sadly at Isaac for a moment before vanishing. Light particles began to flood into the Holy Prince, restoring his injury. Another angelic life lost. Bitterness and actual fury could now be heard as the Holy Prince glared at Dorian. The kingly aura he gave off was on full force, running wild in the enclosed space. Dorian hadn't been watching passively in that time. He'd simultaneously activated a spell and another ability while the Holy Prince healed himself. Fire magic. Flame sword. He mixed the spell with his Black Flames ability, activating it multiple times. He formed a web of swords that were covered in black flames around himself, a protective barrier that the Shade would have to break through if he wanted to reach him. Dorian had correctly surmised from the Shade Prince's movements that the Shade preferred melee combat and wasn't much of a wizard. Ability activate, Hyperion Beam. As he did this, he also activated his Hyperion Beam ability, starting to charge it up. The attack was imbued with energy from both the Law of Wrath and the Law of Valor, giving it a decidedly powerful strength. The strain Dorian felt was enormous. Activating so many abilities simultaneously while also maintaining his awareness made this the most difficult battle Dorian had ever experienced. You will die for that, Beralian. Dorian's odd fighting techniques had somehow managed to successfully convince the Shade that he was a member of the Boral Autarky. Unfortunately, that just seemed to have made the Shade even more determined to kill him. Whoosh! The prince became fully serious. The brilliant white armor once again fully enclosed him. A glowing lance once more appeared in his arms. This time, however, the air began to whip back and forth as light began to concentrate. Distortions ran flush as energy exploded and ran wild, the world visibly starting to warp. I can't let him finish charging that attack. Dorian instantly made a snap judgment call. Without hesitation, Dorian brought all of the flame swords he had cast into existence together, side by side. He then threw up the still charging Hyperion Beam, causing it to merge with the black flames and flame swords. RKKKKKKK. An odd keening noise echoed out as Dorian's attacks combined in an unorthodox way, causing the charging Hyperion Beam ball to be covered in red and black flames. Dorian felt a huge amount of strain just holding the ball together. Immediately he released it, pointing it directly at the Shade Prince. Black Sword Beam. Go! Dorian named the attack as he launched it forward. The combination of magic shaped the beam of light into a massive, pointed sword, trailing black and red flames in the air like a beautiful river of boiling heat. The attack seared through the sky and pierced right towards the Shade Prince. Land. Dorian pulled on his soul, willing the attack to take out the Shade with every iota of his being. Whoosh! The sword-like beam of light melted through the air in an instant. Dorian mentally checked his status as he launched the attack. Dorian, Soul Status, Soul Stage. Lord Class, Pseudo King. Health. Perfect. Energy. 41,213 112,220 Damn, I'm burning through energy. He mentally swore. By Yoorn. The sword-like laser of energy slammed directly into the Shade Prince's unmoving figure. Instead of an explosion or cascade of energy, the beam melted right through the armor of the Shade. And directly pierced Isaac's heart, incinerating it in one go. What? Dorian started in shock. The blow had been a fatal one. Once more, however, an angel appeared, floating above the Shade's body. The angel looked down sadly, and, once more, the Shade Prince began to heal. 3 lives you've cost me. I'm down to just 2 now. Isaac's voice was haggard as he looked at Dorian. His angelic lives could revive him from death, but each time he died or was fatally wounded, he would have to experience the agony and pain of being killed of that injury, twice over. His second lives were powerful tools, but they came with a painful price. No more. The energy around the Shade Prince seemed to freeze. He had finished charging his attack. The kingly aura vanished, leaving a pristine, calm aura floating in the air. One that was incredibly full of both danger and peace at the same time. All right. Well, that's just cheating. Dorian's eyes flashed stubbornly. He could revive from being killed over and over? How was that fair, at all? Didn't that mean the Shade Prince was nigh unkillable as long as he had extra lives left? On to Plan B then. Dorian didn't waste any time, his mind racing ahead of him. He couldn't maintain his perfect body and keep fighting indefinitely. Solaris Blut. Isaac closed his eyes and then opened them, now shining with golden light as he announced his attack. One of the Holy Prince's most powerful techniques, Solaris Blood, was a technique he created himself. By condensing the energy in his soul and enhancing his body to the extreme, while activating and spending one of the painstakingly expensive angelic lives he'd formed, Isaac could accelerate himself to an ungodly speed. The impact of moving his body at such a speed was, without a doubt, fatal to himself. However, the use of an angelic life allowed him to fully restore himself after attacking, making the double-edged technique one that cost him only an angelic life, and not his own. The Holy Prince's figure blurred, even in Dorian's vastly enhanced perception of time, appearing next to him in a single millisecond. The prince's attack was so fast that even he himself could not track it, aiming blindly at Dorian. He was moving at far too fast a speed for Dorian to be able to defend against, even in his fast state. In the 30,000 worlds, a huge amount of research had gone into the various reaction speeds of different beings. Regular humans could recognize the existence of something in as little as 13 milliseconds. Powerful Lord-class humans could realize something and react to it in as little as 3 or 4 milliseconds. Dorian, in his enhanced state, with his perfect body ability active while using his Ifrit form, was able to react to the insanely fast attack in a fraction of a millisecond. While his body could not move at anywhere near such a speed, Dorian's mind could. And in that millisecond, Dorian transformed again. At his current level of strength, the transformation from one form to another took approximately a microsecond, a thousandth of a millisecond. Whoosh! The Holy Prince's Solaris Blood strike cut forward, penetrating the air where Dorian had been standing. And pierced by him, slamming into the stone wall of the courtyard. Boom! An explosion echoed out as the Holy Prince's lance exploded, as did a good meter of stone from the wall, showering the courtyard in light particles and stone debris. The armored body of the Holy Prince seemed to collapse in on itself as it hit the wall, instantly killing the Holy Prince. An instant later, the angelic apparition appeared once more, bringing the Holy Prince back to life. Just in time for the prince to blearily turn around, on full alert as he looked at where he expected to see Dorian's remains. And instead found himself staring at empty air. Again? Isaac muttered, his voice full of pain and confusion as he gathered his bearings. Skitter skitter. A clattering sound drew Isaac's attention as he slowly turned and looked off to the left. Just in time to see a small, tiny lizard hurtling its tiny lizard body through the air, a spatial ring wrapped around its neck like a necklace. A tiny little gray shirt and matching tiny black pants could be seen worn on the tiny lizard's body. The same type of outfit that Dorian, Isaac's target, had been wearing. Only, now tiny lizard-sized. Tap. In the instant that Isaac blinked, his eyes wide in shock and at a complete loss, the lizard landed on the door of splendor, its paws tapping upon it. And instantly vanished, leaving the Holy Prince alone, his mouth agape. What? Chapter 140. Future. Welcome to the Door of Splendor, Challenger. The ruins Osra's voice echoed in Dorian's head as he touched the large door and teleported once more, into one of the magical trials that Ukeli had set up. Yes, it worked, Dorian thought gleefully, returning to his wrath vampire form. He looked down at his clothes approvingly. They hadn't ripped apart. Buying the set was probably one of his best purchases yet. He'd managed to escape from the Holy Prince using his backup plan. If he couldn't bluff or fight his way out, he could always just run away using his abilities as an anomaly. In the moment before he had been attacked by that final strike, Dorian had realized that his enemy was simply too powerful to face head-on, at least right now. The ability to revive himself after dying was too strong, and even without that, the Holy Prince was a deadly foe. Dorian, Soul Status, Soul Stage. Lord Class, Pseudo King. Health. Perfect. Energy. 17,218 112,221. Geez, that was far too close. He thought as he checked his status, shaking his head. He'd only managed to take the prince out so many times due to catching him by surprise and constantly keeping up the pressure. With his energy stores running low, Dorian opted to flee rather than continue combat. So, just before the lance had pierced through him, Dorian had transformed into his red salamander form and immediately condensed it again, becoming a baby lizard. This caused the lance to miss him entirely. He'd then taken advantage of Isaac's shock to sprint over to the Door of Splendor and lay a tiny claw on it, activating the challenge. That will only work on him once, though. Dorian thought, rubbing his chin. He wouldn't be able to use that plan against the same person twice. He shook the thoughts from his head as he looked around, taking in where he'd been dropped off. He had been teleported into a new room. Similar to the courtyard, it was a room that was sparsely decorated, with plain gray stone walls, a gray stone floor, and a gray stone ceiling. Everything seemed drab, except for the one entrance and exit to the room. An identical, though much smaller, copy of the door that had been set in that courtyard. The door of splendor, huh, he muttered, looking at it. As he spoke aloud, the ruins Asra responded. This trial is a test of your willpower, challenger. Open this door of splendor and find past it your destined reward. Her advice was a little more helpful than the Asra in his head usually was. All right, he shrugged and then tapped on his spatial ring. Whoosh! A bound sheath of paper appeared in his hands. Euclid's journal. Dorian opened it up and began to look through it, skimming over everything until he, eventually, found something about the challenge he was currently facing. Today, we finished construction of the first challenge in the Ascension Ruins, as we have decided to call them. A challenge that we have named the Door of Splendor. This is one of our biggest forays into experimenting with fate. Asra and I wanted to create something that could cause fate to willingly manipulate itself. As we stand now, neither Asra nor I possess the power to change fate, and we must rely upon external factors. The challenge is a simple one. It tests the willpower of the challenger. It taps into the forces of fate itself, projecting a vision of a possible future that the challenger would fear. Everything it shows is a real possibility that could occur. The future shown is just one of many, and there is no guarantee that future will come true, for the forces of fate are abstruse. Even I cannot truly judge the merits of what the door shows. As long as the challenger can view whatever future is thrust their way without collapsing, and anyone that hopes to take in the forte of knowledge or treasure that I have left behind must have at least that strength of will, they will be rewarded by whatever it is they most desire in the Ascension Ruins. The construction of this challenge took months and was incredibly expensive, but I think, today, we've finally reached a point where I am pleased. This is one of the biggest challenges, and one of the most key ones. Dorian put the journal down, his eyes shining. If he passed this, he would be rewarded with whatever it was he most desired. Didn't that mean he was just a step away from saving Will? All he wanted was a vast supply of treasure, and if his reward for completing this challenge was what he wanted. How do I start the challenge, Asra number 2? Or, I guess you are the original Asra, huh? Dorian asked, getting slightly off track. The journal hadn't contained any other specifics on the makeup of the trial. Asra number 2 did not reply. Dorian frowned, but then realized she must not be a genie like his Asra was. The voice was probably pre-recorded and couldn't answer questions. I probably go up to the door. Dorian shrugged as he came to that conclusion. He didn't hesitate as he stepped forward, walking right up to it. He paused right in front of the resplendent door, looking at it with bated breath. He rested his right hand on it, and instantly felt the world around him shiver. Abruptly, with no fanfare at all, Dorian found himself standing atop a grassy hill alone. The dying light of the sun lit up the evening sky, giving the dead trees that stood, bent and broken near Dorian, an eerie appearance. Huh, Dorian muttered, looking at his hands. They were human. His body had transformed into that of a human body for some reason. No, he thought, shaking his head. He raised his hands up toward the sun. His hands were translucent. He had become a sort of spirit or insubstantial form of some sort. Dorian still saw his soul as human, as he figured that was what this was. Ha ha ha. A child's laughter drew Dorian's attention towards the bottom of the hill. At the base of the hill, Dorian could see what looked like an old, mostly destroyed village. At the outskirts of it, Dorian could make out a harried-looking woman dragging along a trio of children, 2 boys and 1 girl. A 4th child, a young boy with a head of brown hair and cheerful eyes, had run ahead, carelessly laughing as he held up a shiny rock. All of them wore ragtag clothes, drab and colorless, and couldn't have been older than 5 or 6 years of age. No, Bori, quiet, not now, the woman called out, her body blurring as she rushed forward and grabbed him. She looked around furiously, her hands trembling. Whoosh! Eeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeeee An odd, keening noise accompanied it, one that caused him to shudder. As he heard it, Dorian realized something. He recognized the woman. It was Helena. All of the children appeared to be half vampire, half human. But not a regular breed of human, Dorian noted. The children seemed to have a magic glow about them, as if they were special in some way Dorian couldn't quite tell by sight. "Quiet, Bori, children, here now, quickly." Her voice was quiet, yet carried all the way up the hill to Dorian. Helena rushed towards one of the run-down buildings, carrying all 4 children at once. "Helena, Helena, it's me." Dorian tried to call out, to no effect. He found that he couldn't call out, his voice unable to make a noise at all. He watched as she moved passively, unable to understand what was going on. However, as she heard the odd, keening noises, a look of despair covered her face, one that was quickly quashed. She set the 3 boys and 1 girl down, quickly pushing them inside the house. "Mommy has to go out, Bori, Hella, Lawrence, Michael." Helena began, giving them all a warm smile. Her hands trembled behind her back as she spoke, hidden from the children. "Again, Mom? I'm sorry." Bori's face was fear-stricken, emotions that a child should never have to feel appearing on it. The other children huddled together, clutching at each other for support, their small arms holding each other steady. "It's okay. I'll be back in a few hours, my babies. And if I don't, you all know what to do, right?" Helena said, giving them all warm smiles. "Yes, Mom, we'll keep going towards the last haven." The children whispered quietly. They all immediately turned around and ran inside the house, hiding themselves. "Yes, children?" Helena whispered, her voice strained, so full of pain that Dorian felt as if he was about to be sick, desperate to help her. "Perhaps that man can protect you. I am not enough anymore." She closed her eyes quietly for a brief moment. A single tear fell down her face. Boom! An explosion rang out, shaking the air. Dorian turned to look for it, seeing nothing that could have caused it. Helena, however, blasted off away from the door, looking up at the sky. Her body started to shake, but her eyes were like steel, fierce and unbending. Dorian could sense a great courage in her, valor indescribable. "Helena," he tried to yell out again, clutching at his hair. She ignored him, continuing to run till she was several hundred meters away from the house the children were hiding in. Thud! Helena came to a stop as a resounding thud echoed, drawing both Dorian and Helena's attention. She was at the northern entrance of the rundown city proper, the city square. Vines and overgrown grass covered the stone floor, giving the place an ancient, ruined appearance. In the middle of this courtyard stood a being the likes of which Dorian had never seen. It was a fairly demonic-looking humanoid, covered in black and gray scales. It was large, standing roughly 3.5 meters tall. Its body was thick and extremely muscular, giving off a rippling sensation of strength. Light green energy seemed to flow within the body of the creature, faintly visible within the scales. 2 large, curved horns lay atop its head, glowing with green energy. On its back were a set of folded black wings, the ever-present pale green energy visible within them, while a long, thick tail rolled off the creature's formidable lower back. The being wore no clothes, the black scales that covered almost every inch of its body providing it with ample protection. Its face was gray, a mostly humanoid face with a strong jaw, a regular nose, and 2 eyes that glowed with pale green light. "Run, Helena, don't fight it," Dorian yelled with all his might as he tried to get Helena to flee, looking on in horror as she confronted the being. The entire creature gave off such a sense of power that Dorian knew that he himself would be flattened by it in an instant. The very air itself seemed to twist around the creature, as if trying to escape it, yet unable. "I finally caught up to you in person, my dearest vampire." The demonic being spoke, its voice surprisingly rich and smooth, belying its fearsome appearance. Dorian shivered as he heard it, however. It felt strangely familiar. Helena's body seemed to rock as she looked at the mighty creature. She took a deep breath. A beautiful, white halo appeared, floating above her head. The air around her seemed to flow quicker as she stood alone, staring at the being as if it were the greatest enemy she had ever faced. "Even you, too, will stand against me, Helena?" The demonic being sounded disappointed, shaking its great head. "After all we went through together, you would give that up?" The creature sighed. "What did you do?" Helena spoke aloud, her eyes cool as she looked at the being. The black-scaled creature sighed again. You understand nothing, Helena. I have truly understood that which he, Ukeli, sought. Perfection, it cannot be found in reality. The only way to find perfection is to reshape reality itself. This path, it only became obvious after truly living again, while bearing his memories and experiences. The being's voice was filled with passion as it spoke, a sense of grandeur and mystery spreading. What did you do? She spat aloud, her arms shaking slightly. I did what I said I would do. I did the right thing. His voice was calm as he replied. I severed every world bridge that connected the 30,000 worlds to the source world. The severing only lasted a short 30 seconds. After all, I do not want to destroy the 30,000 worlds. Far from it, I am here to save them. Source world? Severed? Dorian didn't understand, but had a sinking feeling in his stomach. No, no, Helena shook her head, tears billowing from her eyes. Her mouth fell open in horror, a sense of grand, huge loss filling her. Yes, Helena, it had to be done. The spatial storms that the severing unleashed cannot destroy a world. They can only end all, or most, life on it. Even if a world does get obliterated, by the laws of the universe it will reform over tens of thousands of years, as long as the source world is still connected. The being said, nodding its head, I have given new life to the 30,000 worlds. Life that, under my guiding hand, will have a chance to achieve perfection. Not life cast aside as worthless by the many. Not life that is ridiculed and tortured, brutally killed by those stronger. Not life where the weak starve while the mighty are gluttons. A life of equality and fairness. Where all beings live together in harmony. No senseless slaughter, no pointless chaos. Peace and happiness shall reign supreme. You are a monster. Helena spat out, the air around her shivering as she put her hands up, facing down the creature. Yes, I am a monster, but I did what needed to be done. You have seen the violence, the hatred, of this world. The evil that people spread. The being sighed, nodding its head sadly. Trillions of innocents have died at your hands and you have the gall to look sad? How dare you? How dare you? Helena's eyes took on a fierce, fiery glow. Her voice was full of equal parts hatred and horror. To think that I once loved you. She spat out pure venom. I love you still, my dearest. The being said back, looking at Helena quietly. Helena shut her eyes for a brief moment, another tear sliding down her face. Goodbye, Dorian. Helena opened her eyes. No love or sadness appeared in her eyes anymore. Only pure, violent anger and determination. Dorian, of the future, sighed. Goodbye, Helena. Whoosh. Boom. Dorian's vision went white. A second later, he reappeared in the room with the door of splendor. Standing alone, his entire body trembling as he recovered from what he had just seen. A vision of a possible future. Stand or fall, the choice is yours. As Dorian was shaking, his heart cast into a million directions, a powerful, authoritative voice appeared in his mind, full of strength. The younger voice of Ukeli. The trial judged Dorian's emotional state and his ability to handle himself. Emotions threatened to swarm over Dorian as the vision settled in him. He clenched his fists, however, refusing to back down, keeping one thought strong in his mind. It is just a possibility. Not certain reality, just a possibility, he said, over and over, forcing back the incredible sense of pain, horror, and fear he felt trying to swarm over him. The fact that it had been him, killing trillions, even killing Helena, forcing children to hide in terror. How had that happened? A few seconds passed as he was locked in an intense, internal battle, forcing his body to stop trembling. A few more seconds passed by in silence. Whoosh! Dorian's body seemed to flutter and disappear. He had successfully passed the first trial of the Ascension ruins.